What's your first and last name?
Brooklyn Fothery.
Okay. All right, whenever
We will
you're ready.
press start.
As soon as you're ready.
Star Wars, Apollo 13, Hidden Figures, The Martian, Star Trek. Growing up, these movies always brought one thing to mind: outer space. You know, the physical universe beyond Earth's atmosphere. That space, where, according to the movies, anything is possible. Well, Earth is getting closer and closer to that statement every day. According to Pacific Standard, astronauts going to Mars can package all the freeze-dried food they're able to ship. But if they're going to survive on another planet one day, they'll need plants to produce oxygen. That's where farming in outer space comes into play. The talk all around the scientific community is that one day we will not live on Earth. Climate change, pollution, or maybe even in some cases, the zombie apocalypse could possibly destroy our Earth and send us to another planet. How would we live there? What would we eat? How would we breathe? Well, scientists from around the world have come up with the idea of farming in outer space. Farming in space refers to the process of growing lettuce and other vegetables in a space station vessel or on Mars itself. Astronauts in space greatly need this because throughout their long journeys, they will soon discover that freeze-dried food is not enough. According to NASA, a lack of vitamin C was all it took to give sailors scurvy, and vitamin deficiencies can cause a number of other health problems. Simply packaging some multivitamins will not be enough to keep astronauts healthy as they travel through deep space. They will need plants to produce oxygen. NASA is looking at ways to provide nutrients in a long-lasting form. The challenge is how to do that exactly without sunlight or the Earth's gravity. For over 30 years, botanist Bruce Bugsby has been collaborating with NASA to develop a closed system for growing plants in space. Planting in space is tough. Because of the low gravity, water distribution is difficult to manage. Roots get starved of oxygen, and stagnant air reduces evaporation and increases leaf temperature. But in recent studies, scientists have conducted a sequence of trial and error tests to perfect the process of growing lettuce in space. By creating highly optimal and growing conditions, scientists hope to offset the biological stress plants experience in space. Scientists have begun growing lettuce in a closed system that replaced soil with a solution containing water and nutrients. They exposed different lettuce plants to different nutrient concentrations and different overall water solubility as well. Other experts agree that such a hydroponic system makes sense for space. According to Simon Gilroy, a botanist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who studies the effects gravity has on plant growth, watering plants in space is really hard. Because there's no gravity, water moves differently. If you get water onto the soil particles, it will just creep over the surface. Using a hydroponic system is certainly not without its challenges. In space, density and weight don't separate cold and warm water the same as they do on Earth. So hydroponics won't mix the same. According to Gilroy, the answer would be to bubble air through it. But if you bubble air into hydroponics, it just makes a foam that never goes away. That's why scientists are proposing sending their plants in a centrifuge when they send their experiments to the International Space Station. While there's still gaps in what we know, we will use our knowledge so far to make this a possibility. Still, after knowing how farming in space works, there's one major question being asked. How much does it cost? According to Modern Farmer, farming in space solves one of the biggest issues in space travel: the price of eating. It costs roughly $10,000 to send food and supplies to the International Space Station. Sending food and supplies to the ISS over and over again is a major economic issue. Since it does cost more than $10,000 to send food and supplies hurling upwards, that means that our $3.75 bread here costs roughly $8,750 to send to space. Plus, the freshest stuff doesn't last long. You can package some fresh produce and it will be good for a week or two. But if you package seeds instead, you can create lasting produce. So, not only is it good for our astronauts' health, but also for NASA's bank account. Now, you may be wondering, why am I talking about space when it's 300,000 miles away? Well, farming in space actually benefits Earth in more ways than one. Crops need to be energy efficient and require as minimal human input as possible. Crops also need to be high in nutrients and be able to withstand high stress environments. These features are desirable on Earth as well. Scientists have begun developing an energy efficient potato crop where the whole plant can be consumed, including roots, shoots, and fruits. This renewed interest in space can only benefit agriculture here on Earth by providing new ways to improve. So, whether it's living on another planet one day or simply providing fresh food for our astronauts, farming in space is something that can change our future. So next time you're watching one of these space-themed movies or simply looking up at the stars, wondering what all is going on, take the time and really think about it. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
So we'll have a few questions for you. Obviously, your topic is a little out of this world. So how did you pick this topic?
So Thanksgiving 2022, me and my family went to Disney World. And we were like, oh, we're gonna have fun, I'm not gonna learn anything, like vacation. But we went into this riverboat ride, and as we were going through the riverboat ride, there's plants hanging from the ceiling. And all of their roots are submerged in water. And I was like, that's not a thing, is this like for show? And they told me it's called hydroponics. So it's basically where plants can grow with no soil required. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And then I go home and we're watching Toy Story and I see Buzz Lightyear and I'm like, oh, he's from space, learned about plants. And then I Googled it and space farming is actually a thing. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever and I thought it was out of the box. And I didn't want to do something like dairy cattle or stuff like that because I'm not really interested in it. But I feel like if I can learn about something out of the box and a little unconventional, then it would just help me expand my knowledge on other stuff and be fun too.
Well, first of all, congratulations on making it to finals.
Thank you.
My question for you is, we know traditional farming and how from the time we put the seed in the ground into the time it's harvested, we know the typical lifespan, how long that's going to take, and the factors that contribute to the timeline. What is the timeline difference whenever it is harvested in space?
So when we're planting plants on the ISS, it does counteract some of the time that it takes to plant on Earth. So on Earth, it's usually like from 9 months and it like can go up from there. In space, it usually adds maybe a couple weeks, 3 weeks or 2, just because of the environmental differences, because it's in a centrifuge, so it does like mimic gravity, but it's not necessarily exactly how it is on Earth. So it does have to take in the different environmental factors like the gravity and then the different way water moves and the sunlight which comes from UV light bulb rays. So it does take like 3 months longer as far as right now as we've experimented, but we're hoping that we can get that down as we continue our research.
So I'm interested in, you talked about the seeds, so sending the seeds is more economical. So they start, all of the plants are started from a seed on the space station, correct? They don't send any live plants to the space station. It's all started from the seed. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. So they'll put the seed into the centrifuge with soil in it. And then once the seed has sprouted and it's gained roots in the soil, they'll remove it from the soil and submerge it into water. And then it moves from the centrifuge to a hydroponic system. So as of right now, we have sent some live plants to see how they'll react. And it's much easier to grow the plant from the seed in the space station than to send a live plant to the ISS because it has travel duration and it will deplete and other stuff like that. But once we put it in the centrifuge, put the soil in and the seed, and after it's sprouted, it's much easier for the plant to grow after we transfer it to hydroponics.
So you talked about potatoes and lettuce. What do you know the total amount of different varieties of vegetables that have been grown in space?
Well, the first ones we have started with are obviously like potatoes, Potato plants are one of the newer ones I researched. So it's actually started in 2021 and it's moved on from there. But lettuce is kind of the starting ground, like the building block. So they're trying to build up from that, like go from lettuce to other leafy plants and then try and get to like peanut plants so we can add a little bit of protein. But right now, since my research, it's really just been lettuce and like different varieties of lettuce, and then newly the potato crop where we can eat the whole thing instead of just what the potato plant produced.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
How are y'all?
Hi.
Blake Cater.
Yes, hi, Blake.
Just whenever y'all ready.
All right, we will start the time when you're ready.
Eat your spinach so you can grow big and strong, just like Popeye. Carrots will help your eyes. Any child would dread when these words would come out of their parents' mouth. In goes a big bite of little green trees. You chew and chew as your parents tell you to hurry and take another bite. But the uneaten broccoli just stares at you from across the plate. So many thoughts running through our heads at this moment, but one that's almost always forgotten is what went into these vegetables to get them onto the dinner table. Behind every good meal is a working system of farmers, various agriculturists, and above all, healthy soil. Howdy, my name is Blake Cater, proudly representing the Sinton FFA chapter and acting as an advocate for the betterment of soil. One of the most important tools to a healthier existence lies right underneath us, our soil. But as soil conditions around the United States and the world continue to worsen, it makes it absolutely imperative that we discuss the concept of healthy soil and healthy life. We create change by first, developing a full understanding of the problem. Second, using new and efficient technologies. And lastly, through legislative support. Anytime that I would injure myself growing up, my dad's first remark would always be, throw some dirt on it. Though with our current soil conditions, this could literally become impossible. Degraded soil around the world is making farms less fertile and threatening the future of our food supply. But what is the direct cause of this insurmountable challenge with soil decomposition? A Forbes article in June 2021 quantifies. Healthy soil requires living mixtures of minerals, microbes, air, water, and around 4% organic matter, such as carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen in order to sustain plant growth. But due to industrial farming methods such as monocropping, intensive tilling, and the use of pesticides and synthetic fertilizers, approximately 1/3 of the world's productive topsoil has been depleted, leaving it with just 0.5% of organic matter, 8 times less than we need. The relationship between healthy soil and healthy human life is profound. USDA nutrient data confirms a significant drop in the amounts of numerous nutrients that are vital to human health in conventionally grown fruits and vegetables over the past 4 years. These nutritional deficiencies have resulted in negative health effects, such as stunted growth, obesity, and non-communicable diseases, such as diabetes and heart disease. Soils affect the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. Perhaps when you enjoyed a slice of watermelon in the summer, your parents told you that if you swallowed a seed, you would grow a watermelon inside your stomach. Although we may never know the truth behind that statement, we do know the truth, that fertilizer is the most important first step to any plant. Needless to say, fertilizer plays a paramount role in maintaining soil fertility, increasing yields, and improving harvest quality. It appears that fertilizer is imperative for healthy human life. The missing link is that a significant portion of fertilizers are wasted, and presently, the cost of fertilizer is skyrocketing. The Texas Farm Bureau reported in January of this year, Texas farmers are experiencing sticker shock as the price of fertilizer continues to climb. Already up as much as 200%, the cost of fertilizer is expected to get even more expensive in 2023. Still, cost isn't the only downside to traditional fertilizers. They also have lingering repercussions. However, to combat the negative nutrient and environmental effects of traditional fertilizers, environmentally friendly fertilizers were developed. EFFs are fertilizers that can reduce environmental pollution by controlling the release of nutrients into the soil. The use of EFFs produces several benefits. Primarily, they help to greatly reduce environmental pollution by being designed to stay on crops for extended periods of time. This allows them to be absorbed gradually and prevents them from being easily washed out. The use of EFFs will find itself as a common practice in the future of agriculture. However, in search of healthy soils through EFFs, our American farmers face a roadblock. A common sight in the status quo finds small farmers lacking support of the United States government. Is this yet another time that small farmers are expected to absorb the rising cost of using what's best for their land and the environment? To meet the challenge of improving our soil and crop yields requires a constant commitment for staple grain crops to keep up with the demand for food. This requires monitoring and economic support to ensure the continued production of quality crops. For years, our Congress has been speaking like our parents. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Though that day is the present. If you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. So today, let's stand up to our legislators and finally help the American small farmers. Today, let's stand up and offer a working solution to our small farmers through EFFs. But more importantly, today, let's represent the soil we stand on and protect the environment. As soil decomposition proves to be one of the toughest challenges for modern agriculture, learning to trust our legislators will be one of the key components to success. But in order to trust them, they need to show us their trust. The best way to accomplish this goal is through depending on agriculturists to advocate for political support on Capitol Hill. This requires dedication and education about our industry and how it operates. It's impossible to find a high school health class without a poster of a man filled with fruits and vegetables titled, "You are what you eat," though this poster often lacks what went into the products to be produced. The nutrients that our soil needs to be functional, and how quickly our soil is losing these nutrients. Health class, along with our parents, teaches us a lot, but neither of them are able to teach us everything that's important. Let's all do our part and create change by educating the world about the urgency of soil degradation. Together, we can make a positive impact on our soil quality through an abundance of knowledge, EFF technology, and lastly, legislative support. Yet with just one missing link, we achieve nothing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, it seems that you're very passionate about this topic. What led you to choose this topic?
So when most people are looking for whatever topic they're going to write their speeches on, they're scrolling through the internet and they're trying to find something that looks like it's going to make a good speech topic. Me personally, I go and find something that I like and I turn that into a good speech topic, right? Not something that's already built. So I was doing research on something completely different, on corn subsidies, and I came across the impact of corn subsidies on our soil quality. And so I was like, well, what's really going on with our soil quality right now within the status quo? And the more research that I did, the more passion that I gained for this topic. I live in a small community of Sinton, Texas, where most of our money from the area comes from farming. And so for me, it's so important to keep those root values that I have in my life and my family and keep them going, and none of those are able to exist without good soil quality. The foundation of everything around this world is built on the quality of our soil, and it's something that I'll fight for until the day I die.
First of all, thank you, or congratulations on making it to the final round. My question for you is, with the new trend of a bunch of these big companies agreeing to become carbon neutral by a certain year, with that, companies like American Airlines, obviously they're burning fossil fuels in the air, they're never going to be carbon neutral, so they're doing carbon contracts where they can get farmers to do regenerative practices, where they can you know what I'm talking about. How do you see this, if this continues to be a trend, impacting the soil quality, and do you see that as a long-term solution?
So I think that this actually could have positive implications on the soil quality. While the stigma around it may be negative, I think one of the things that we're seeing the most is an increase in urbanized farming. And this is really good because that's one of the main things that they're doing in order to go against, or to help these airline companies. So what they're doing is they're building these rooftop gardens, or they're going and building greenhouses in big cities, and this is how they're combating the carbon emissions. So that's not really going too much against our soil quality because they're not really being built in soil. They're using aquaponics, hydroponics, and so with that, we're able to focus more on our soil quality while they're combating that issue with carbon emissions.
So in your speech, you talked about EFFs as being one way to preserve the soil health. What are some other techniques that farmers can implement on their farms outside of EFFs?
Yes, ma'am. So that's the thing. It's all extremely expensive. One of the things that I'd love to talk about is regenerative agriculture, which is something where farmers, mostly large-scale farmers, because it's so expensive, they go into areas that wouldn't technically be used for farming, and they would turn that into farming areas. Of course, it's not going to be as good because we're not using prime soil or prime areas, but they would go into, for example, a desert, and they would find ways to make that into good farming areas. The United States Congress is currently working on a bill it's the Regenerative Farming Act, actually, and what it would do is it would give farmers more land to do that, and so a lot of that land it's all federal land, and so it's like unideal areas where we would do that, and so that would help because we'd have more area to farm, and we wouldn't be overusing our marginal farmland that we have today.
So in your research on current farm land, did any of your research, how does EFF compare to like no-till? Do you know what the advantages of one versus the other is?
They're completely different, but they're both extremely beneficial. So no-till farming, because they're leaving all the nutrients into the ground and they're leaving all the root systems that are already there, those are biodegrading, and then the soil is able to absorb those nutrients. So that is one way. However, we also have to look at what's going to happen next, because then that land is a lot harder to plan on for the next year when we use EFFs. Although it's a little bit more expensive, what we have to look at is the positive benefits that it brings. And again, what I said in my speech, these fertilizers go onto the plants, and instead of just immediately washing out, they stay on the plant for a lot longer, and then the plants are able to absorb them. But it's not only a problem with soil, because we have to look at what traditional fertilizers are doing to our oceans as well. There is a dead zone off the coast of Louisiana that is the size of Delaware, which is really big. And what dead zones are is it's areas with algae blooms where a bunch of algae grows, and then nothing else can live in that area. So that's something else that's happening with traditional fertilizers when they just run off and go into the ocean.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Do you all need my name?
Yes, sir. What's your first and last name?
Victor Vizcarra. I can spell the last name for you.
Okay.
Vizcarra.
Very good.
And whenever you're ready.
I don't know about each of you, but for me, sometimes all it takes is a breath of fresh air, a sip of cool water, or a nice vacation to change my entire outlook on life. But what happens when air isn't fresh, water isn't available, and we can't put gas in our cars for those weekend getaways? What will our outlook on life be then? Are these even legitimate concerns? Good afternoon. My name is Victor Vizcarra of the Dawson FFA chapter, and no, I'm not here to spread doom and gloom, end of the world as we know it theories, but instead inform you of what really cool steps are being taken to reduce the strain on our natural resources now to ensure that these fears may never become a reality. It is true, there have been numerous recent attacks on the agricultural industry, blaming them for the depletion of many of our natural resources. But sadly, few people take the time to realize what creative ideas those in the agricultural industry are coming up with to reduce the strain on those natural resources. Even better than that, there are those big-brained individuals out there who are coming up with ideas to help the environment, who don't even realize that they are also contributing to the agricultural industry through the creation of new markets and practices which can be adapted and used in numerous areas of production. The top natural resource in the world is water. There are 1.2 billion people living in areas of water scarcity, and creativity and innovation are leading the charge in remedying this crisis. For example, researchers at Carnegie Mellon University have developed the world's first drinkable book. This book is being distributed throughout developing countries such as Ghana, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. Each page of the book details sanitation methods which will improve the status of drinking water. Trust me, I know what you're thinking. There isn't hardly anything that's cool about a book on sanitation. This alone is no novel idea. Get it? Sorry for that, but cheesy joke aside, the innovation in this creation lies in the materials used to produce each book. Each page is printed on a scientific coffee filter, which purifies water, eliminating 99.9% of bacteria. Each book provides the reader with up to 4 years of purified drinking water. This gives the phrase, cool sip of water, a whole new meaning. Number 2, in the world's greatest natural resources, and perhaps the most taken granted of, clean air. This is one area that the agriculture industry takes hit after hit in the blame battle. There have even been millions of dollars dumped into research aimed at controlling methane collection from cattle flatulence. As ridiculous as that sounds, there are major causes for concern. The World Health Organization has claimed that 3.8 million premature deaths related to heart disease and various forms of cancer can be directly attributed to air pollution. As frightening as this statistic is, there are far more interesting ways to take the heat off the agricultural industry and improve our air supply than monitoring cow farts. One prime example are vertical forests in Milan. Created by architect Stefano Borri, these forests resemble modern apartment buildings with shrubs, trees, and other plants at each level. These plants absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as well as other various pollutants that contribute to global warming. Borri is currently in the design process for more vertical forests in Leizhou, China, a city soon expecting a population growth of over 30,000 citizens. It is expected that in this city alone, vertical forests will absorb 10,000 tons of CO2 and 57 tons of other pollutants. Our third top natural resource worldwide is fossil fuels. Again, we turn to yet another sector of agriculture for a solution to a problem that so many blame on the industry. So what's the solution? Anaerobic digestion. Remember the cattle flatulence I spoke of earlier? Anaerobic digesters takes what's being released from the south of the cow and turn it into a positive for our environment and our reliance on fossil fuels. Anaerobic digesters convert manure into low-carbon, biogas-fired electricity with the potential to displace 2.5% of our nation's power generation. According to the AgStar division of the EPA, there are 273 anaerobic digesters throughout the United States, and at the end of the year 2022, 20 more were currently under construction. Within the year 2022 alone, anaerobic digesters reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 5.5 million metric tons of CO2, and energy generation totaled approximately 2.46 million megawatt hours. Frank Mittlehner, professor at California Davis University, works with a German village called Hyundai to establish anaerobic digesters to create biogas for heating and for cooking. This process has enabled the village to grow completely independent from their national gas grid. Something I'm sure you will agree sounds pretty amazing after the rolling blackouts of Snowmageddon 2021. Thomas Edison once said, "There is a way to do it better. Find it." This is exactly what has to happen if we are to reduce the strain on our natural resources. But who said it had to be done in a boring, traditional fashion? Innovation is a driving force in the positive changes our world has encountered, both globally and here at home in the United States. Sure, we can date it back to the days of the cotton gin or the days of the steel plow, if you like, but our focus for innovation must always be on the future. We cannot sit around and hope for the best, and today I have given you several examples of individuals who have refused to do just that. We never know what crazy idea might be the one that saves us. No, it might not be methane collection from cattle flatulence or backpacks on pigeons used to measure air quality. That's a real thing. But it will be something nobody has considered in the past. I encourage you to join this driving force. Be receptive to new ideas and to always proceed with caution. So, next time you take a breath of fresh air, a sip of cool water, or plan your next vacation, think of those who are hard at work to ensure you have those opportunities in the future. Thank you. Thank you.
So you gave us a lot of examples and about this topic, and my question will be two parts.
Yes, ma'am.
So why did you pick this topic? That's the first part. And then the second part is, out of all of these examples that you gave us, which one is your favorite and why?
Yes, ma'am. To begin with why I chose this topic because I'm an aspiring marine biologist, and a lot of my field has to do with not only the agricultural industry, but the different types of biotechnology that go into marine biology that we as people who might not be agriculturally educated as some others might not realize. For example, marine biologists have to study animals, and we also have to study how carbon impacts the effects of water in the ocean, which is a part of the agricultural industry, as I mentioned before. With that being said, my favorite one of these inventions that I mentioned has to be the anaerobic digester. We're seeing our fossil fuels disappear right in front of us, and it's a problem that's not going to get better. It's a problem that's only going to get worse. Anaerobic digesters, however, allow us to truly make the most of the impacts that we have by using farm animals who we might not have expected their manure to power our cities in the future, but it'll be something that doesn't have any pollutants like fossil fuels do, and will be something that will be here forever as long as we are.
All right. Well, first of all, congratulations on making it to the final round.
Thank you.
My question for you is, a lot of your examples were stuff that, from what it seemed like, weren't happening here in the state of Texas. Every farming practice and agriculture looks so different across our entire nation and in the world, and even across just the state of Texas.
Yes, ma'am.
What type of practices do you see being incorporated into Texas agriculture first? And if so, where is it happening? What type of production systems are we talking about?
Yes, ma'am. One practice that I've actually mentioned in my speech that I do see growing in Texas is vertical forests. We see different states like New York or states up east that have a lot of factory production utilize these vertical forests because it helps get rid of some of the pollution in the air. However, in fact, in December when we went to state LDEs, we drove through Dallas and we saw that Dallas had different vertical forests as well. It wasn't just a concept that was up in the east, it was a concept that was moving down here because of the factory productions linked to Dallas, Texas. This is something that as cities will grow, they will start to implement as well. Because like I've said, pollution has many negative effects that doesn't just affect people in one certain region, but it's something that's being introduced into the southern states that are starting to have more factory production as agricultural production increases as well.
So I have one additional question. You talked a lot about these practices as additional practices on top of traditional. From what I'm understanding, do you think that any of these practices will replace traditional agriculture or just serve as a supplement to kind of counteract the activities happening in each?
Well, you can't get any more basic than traditional agriculture. It's the backbone of what our country was built on. So even while these practices might help to make these traditions better, traditional agriculture will always be here. It will never disappear. It's something that we as agriculturists and even people in a regular society have to realize that agriculture isn't going away. Other industries might decline or disappear, but these traditions that our country was built on are always going to remain here. And these new practices that we can implement will help our societies, but will not replace the initial value of traditional agriculture.
Thank you.
May I shake y'all's hands?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
first and last name?
Abby Schooler.
All right. Schooler, like school?
With an ER. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
We will start the time whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. My name is Abby Schooler, and something you probably don't know about me is that I am lactose intolerant. And being lactose intolerant means that I've had to look into some pretty interesting alternatives. Now, there's no doubt that dairy alternatives are on the rise in recent years, whether that be because of lactose intolerance, lifestyle choice, environmental impact, animal rights, or simply because of the aesthetic packaging. No matter the reason, it's clear to see that this has had drastic effects on the agriculture industry. Luckily, both of these industries fall under the broad umbrella of agriculture. If plant-based milk is selling, that's money in the farmers' pockets. And if traditional dairy milk is running the market, then dairy farmers are keeping their operations alive. With this information, a question arises. Is there room in the future for both of these industries? And how environmentally friendly and sustainable are they? First, let's take a look at the side of agriculture that has boomed in recent years: the plant, nut, seed, and oat farms. According to Ag Daily, these plant-based products have grown by a means of 20% to $2.5 billion in the year 2021. Now, there's no doubt that 2020 and 2021 were the year that a lot of things changed in this country, including the growth in these dairy-free substitutes. The correlation between the two is simple: TikTok. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of this new form of social media, where everything is in short 30-second to minute-long videos, the perfect amount of time to advocate or grasp one's attention. Dairy alternatives stopped being only for those with intolerances and allergies and started to become a trend. People would post their oat milk lattes or almond milk frappuccinos, spreading the idea of a put-together or aesthetic lifestyle. And this mainly appeals to the up-and-coming generations. So it makes me wonder, as time goes on, will the trend fizzle out, or will it continue to grow and eventually sweep the legs out from under the dairy industry? The modern, fast-paced world we live in nowadays is all about productivity and efficiency. With that being said, traditional dairy milk has a short-lived shelf life, while plant-based alternatives have a shelf life up to 6 months unrefrigerated due to the varying pasteurization, preservation, and heating techniques. So, with the mindset that a life of hurry equals success, then why wouldn't you choose the one that puts you at the least risk of running into an expiration date, or the inconvenience of running to the store? This appeals to the younger generation of consumers for a variety of reasons: lactose intolerance, presumed health benefits, and this appeals to the younger generation of consumers for a variety of reasons: lactose intolerance, accessibility, and presumed health benefits. Though most people who buy dairy alternatives do so because they have some sort of intolerance or allergy, which means their body cannot process lactose, the common sugar present in dairy milk. Lactose intolerance is on the rise and is present in about 65% of Americans. So having these alternative sources of milk and milk byproducts is crucial for ensuring equality for those with intolerances and allergies. The milk aisle in the supermarket is vast and filled with dairy and non-dairy products. So how do consumers make their choice? Well, the plant-based dairy industry does a fantastic job of marketing their products. Almost all plant-based products have simple, colorful, and recognizable labeling. And plant-based alternatives are placed in an open refrigeration system, whereas traditional dairy milk is hidden away among thousands of white milk cartons in a closed refrigerator. Accessibility is key in the plant-based dairy industry, and to put it simply, farmers are utilizing marketing techniques and milking the benefits. A common misconception nowadays is that plant-based milk is healthier than traditional dairy milk. However, according to the National Library of Medicine, traditional dairy milk contains more bioactive components and beneficial nutrients than artificially plant-derived milks. So why does this misconception occur? Modern age marketing techniques. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm a sucker for a cute label. Elaborating on some of these marketing techniques, plant-based dairy alternatives are often advertised as environmentally friendly or more sustainable than traditional dairy milk. According to the University of Oxford, traditional dairy milk emits 3 times as much greenhouse gases, uses 10 times as much land, 2 to 20 times as much water, and results in higher levels of eutrophication. And if you were like me and did not know what eutrophication meant, it's essentially the runoff into bodies of water, causing an overproduction of algae, leading to the demise of wildlife. So if the determining factor in your household is your environmental footprint, it seems to be plant-based products are the way to go. However, there's no exact science to determining which plant-based product is best when it comes to the environment. For example, almond milk emits higher greenhouse gases and uses more land than soy, for example, but requires less water and results in lower eutrophication. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as ditching all traditional dairy products. There are generations of dairy cattle operations and people's livelihoods that need to be taken into consideration as well. This brings us into the dairy industry. As of 2021, 40.43 billion pounds of milk was sold. But just 12 years prior, in the year 2009, 54.5 billion pounds was sold. Let's do some quick math. The difference between the two rates is 14.07 billion pounds, and the average milk carton costs $3.37 and weighs 8.34 pounds, which roughly rounds to 40 cents a pound. So having done the math, the dairy industry, looking solely at the liquid milk sales, lost $5.628 billion in 12 years. Luckily, there is more to the dairy industry than just liquid milk. When looking at the industry as a whole, the average American household buys and consumes more dairy than in previous years, making up for the loss in liquid milk sales and making more per capita than in the past. Even still, since 2003, America has lost over half of its dairy operations. Another factor weighing into this decline is the lessening replacement heifer rate. The replacement rate is at its lowest since 2009, with a rate of 48.8%. This is frightening for the industry and the cows themselves. This is illustrating that we have less cows to meet higher and growing demands, therefore leading to more rigorous expectations of each individual cow, decreasing their quality of life. So, to revisit our original question, is there room for both of these industries in the coming years? The answer is simple. Yes. Both of these industries are working towards the same goal: feeding the world. Being an educated consumer, it is important to know the facts and the values behind the companies you choose to support. The plant-based dairy industry provides an outlet for those who have lactose intolerant or who care about their carbon footprint. And the traditional dairy industry is for those who value tradition and the personal lives behind these smaller, large companies. And as for me and my family, we choose to support the agriculture industry as a whole by buying both plant-based dairy and traditional dairy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So obviously you stated when you started why you chose this topic. So you've already answered my first question. So you talked about the plant-based products with you being lactose intolerant. What is of the plant-based products, what is your favorite? You mentioned almond, soy, and in your research, how many varieties of plant-based dairy? I guess it's a two-part question then. So what's your favorite? And then out of all the plant-based options, how many are there total? Do you know?
So to answer your first question, I would say that my favorite is probably oat milk. I think that's one that's definitely gained a lot of popularity over the last few years through social media. I know that's a lot of celebrity Starbucks orders involve oat milk, and so I would say that's probably the tastiest and I would say closest to regular generic milk. And as for options, there are a lot of options that are coming up rapidly. So some of those include cashew, oat, soy, almond, there's, I know, pea milk even. And so I'm not entirely sure all of the different ones, but I kind of wanted to just talk about the plant-based industry as a whole versus the dairy industry, but I'll definitely have to go home and research all of the specific plant-based dairy industries because I find that interesting. So, yeah.
Great.
Well, first of all, congratulations on making it to the final round. I have 2 questions for you. My first one, I know this is a complex idea, but do you foresee that the plant-based dairy products seeping into more of the dairy market, thinking maybe coming out with a way to make a heavy cream cheese? I know there's been yogurts from plant-based, but do you see it coming into the market more and having different options of dairy-based products?
I definitely do. I do not think that this trend is going to slow down by any means. I think that if anything, it will just gain popularity. And especially because humans, as a species, lactose intolerance is increasing, and it's increasing fast. And so I think that people are going to start buying more, even if they aren't lactose intolerant necessarily, like I said, with the social media trends and things like that. So I definitely think that it's going to play a prevalent role, but I don't think that that is going to take away from the dairy industry. I think that all things in life have a good way of finding an equilibrium at some point, and I feel like that just because one industry is increasing doesn't mean the other industry has to decrease. I think if anything, both will grow with the coming years. So, yeah.
And my second question, with the growing supply and popularity of the plant-based milks, there has been a lot of pushback from the dairy industry where they're wanting to add more regulation as to how the things are going to be labeled. With the upcoming farm bill, just things in the future, how do you see that policy will begin to affect the plant-based market?
Could you elaborate on the question a little bit? Like, for what policy do you foresee?
There would be, that's the question. Could there be
Okay.
potential for new policy? There's been a lot of pushback on even the term of using the word milk, and that has been stuff that has gone through the legislation process before.
I think that plant-based dairy milk should be considered as milk, because just because it's not necessarily derived from an animal or a cow, I think that's the cool part about it. It's for a group of people that do not necessarily have the same opportunities. It's like, should gluten-free flour still be considered flour? Just because somebody can't appreciate something like the regular group of people doesn't mean that it's not as valid or as valuable as the original product.
Great.
So,
Yeah,
Thank you.
very good.
Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you. Yes.
Y'all have a great day.
Yes,
You too.
you too. Thank you.
Good, how are you?
Doing great.
All right, Luke, we're ready whenever you are.
Teacup Poodles, the famous Labrador Retriever, and the fan favorite Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. These adorable, cute-faced, beautifully featured canines are in popular demand for each of their stunning breed characteristics. However, these appearances can give way to harsh reality. Beneath the fur and wagging tails, man's best friend struggles genetically. Selection for exterior traits has forever altered the genome of many dog breeds. Hypoallergenic fur, body size, breed crosses, purebred characteristics, the list goes on and on. Breeding purebred dogs over time has decreased the gene pool, solely due to the selection of exterior traits, with little regard to what was happening beneath the surface. I was reminded of this atrocity as I prepared the surgery table at the veterinary clinic I work at. It was time to clean the surgical site of our next patient, the cutest toy poodle, weighing a mere 3.4 pounds. Why on earth would this 1-year-old dog need surgery, except for maybe a simple neuter? I picked up the clipboard and my heart sank for my furry friend. 2 severe subluxating patellas, in which the dog could barely walk on its hind end. This is just one case of genetic mutations resulting in the canine industry today. In addition to patella luxations, heart failure, cancer, hip dysplasia, von Willebrand's disease, gingival hyperplasia, when will this stop? These genetic conditions are the leading factors of canine death in America. Without a change to their genetic makeup, man's best friend is at serious risk. However, what if there was a way to somehow maintain favorable characteristics and combat genetic disorders while furthering canine health and prosperity? Seems ideal and far-fetched, but this capability already exists. Traditionally known in the agricultural industry for crop development, this cutting-edge scientific advancement provides hope for the canine world. Innovative, transformational, and applicable to canine health. CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology. CRISPR-Cas9 consists of two components, the Cas9 protein and the guide RNA. The guide RNA identifies a genetic sequence needing to be edited, removed, or replaced, while the Cas9 protein acts as molecular scissors to cut the DNA strand at precise locations. When we know the genes and genetic sequencing that causes diseases and mutations, we can create the guide RNA strand. This is then attached to a Cas9 protein and placed into target cells. The cells will then naturally copy the corrected genetic material onto the DNA strand and replicate it in all future cells. Thus, the targeted genetic sequence and its implications are fully removed. To break this down, picture CRISPR-Cas9 as a Google document. Over time, you happen to misspell a word, and the computer identifies the mistake and underlines it in red. From there, you click on that specific word and choose to replace the word, fix the spelling, or delete it entirely. This is the exact process of CRISPR-Cas9. In short, this is a method used to identify genetic sequencing that's needing to be replaced, inserted, or deleted for the benefit of the living species. Once we know the genes that cause life-threatening conditions like Addison's disease, lymphoma, and hip dysplasia, we can solve the problem. In the agricultural industry, CRISPR-Cas9 has proven to be incredibly valuable in both crop production and in animal health. Producers have seen massive results, most commonly with cotton, rice, wheat, and corn crops. Pest and herbicide resistance are just two of the vital results seen in the crop industry. Likewise, the livestock industry has seen incredible advances in the cattle and swine industries by using this technology. For example, tuberculosis-resistant dairy cattle have been produced, showing the future of transgenic animals in society. CRISPR-Cas9 has only created better circumstances and success. Therefore, this technology can and should be incorporated into the canine world. In fact, a 2021 study conducted in South Korea successfully produced dogs without hip dysplasia. By locating and replacing the fibrillin-2 gene in the animal's DNA, 2 Labrador retrievers were born after previously being identified positive for hip dysplasia. In a similar study, beagles were used to eliminate a neurodegenerative disorder through the correction of the DJ1 gene. All dogs showed complete or partial repression of the targeted site. This is phenomenal news. Throughout years of scientific initiative, the veterinary medicine industry can identify most disease-causing genes. We already know that cancer is caused by the P53 and TP53 genes. Heart failure is caused by the MYH07 gene, and brachiocephalic dysfunction is caused by SMOC2. We can and have been able to identify what causes death and disease, but now with CRISPR-Cas9, we can fix it. Based on these genes, we can code guide RNA, pair it with a Cas9 protein, and see incredible, lasting results. Longer, healthier, happier lives for our companions are finally here. However, pushback and public concern has been raised over the incorporation of gene editing technology in the canine world. Specifically, concerns over animal welfare and lack of familiarity are prevalent. While some suggest CRISPR-Cas9 is inhumane, research has proven animal health has drastically increased due to this technology. In addition, CRISPR-Cas9 simply corrects genetic sequencing that could, and eventually would, occur naturally. The new introduction of CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology is just that, new. But this humane, natural, and precise technology is safe for our canine friends, and it's one of the only ways to better their lives and futures. Intense selective breeding has caused disaster in man's best friend. Selection for exterior, phenotypic traits has led to many genetic diseases, mutations, and predispositions. Unfortunately, many of our loyal companions who are always there to wag their tails, lick our faces, and provide us with immeasurable love have or will soon develop serious life-threatening conditions due to their genetic makeup. Yet, CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology provides hope. Hope for corrected genomes, hope for future health, and hope to keep man's best friend always wagging. Thank you. I'm now ready for questions.
With your research on this topic, did you run across any examples of what this is going to cost the dog owner for any
Yes,
of
ma'am.
these treatments?
So according to Yale University, which they perform a lot of research with CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing, for dogs it would be about $10,000 to $20,000 per sample in that knockout gene repression for a canine species. However, while this may seem like a big number, many research institutions like Yale, Harvard, Stanford have showed significant interest in this. In addition, breed organizations and organizations like the American Kennel Club have also showed substantial interest in CRISPR-Cas9 since it provides such a high reward for gene correction in the canine species. And so even though this number ranges from $10,000 to $20,000 per species, many organizations and research institutions are highly interested.
I don't know if I missed it, you might have said it, but what year did they start doing this research to utilize this application of gene editing? And then has there been any studies done, if they have successfully done this, on what that life expectancy looks like in that animal?
Yes, ma'am. To clarify the question, are you talking specifically CRISPR-Cas9 in
Yes,
canines?
CRISPR, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
In canines, yes, sir.
So the research has just begun, and in 2021, I mentioned South Korea has performed research in addition to Japan and China. They've performed the initial research studies with CRISPR-Cas9 in the canine industry. They've successfully produced dogs with brain dysfunction, hip dysplasia, like I mentioned, and even though they haven't started implementing the research in the United States, they've seen no negative outputs in their research studies in Japan, South Korea, and China.
Any other questions? We're good.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Caitlin, you're welcome to start whenever you're ready.
I tend to be accident prone. I promise you, it's not a normal day unless I trip at least twice. You know, I've been lucky I've never hurt myself too seriously. Which gets me thinking, what if I ever did need a transplant or something? I hear on the news about the shortage of donors, but what if I could tell you that our generation could successfully perfect a solution to this problem called xenotransplantations? First, what is a xenotransplantation? According to FDA.gov, xenotransplantation is the process of grafting or transplanting tissues or organs between two different members of species, offering an unlimited supply of organs and cells for clinical transplantation. Now, it's important to note, human-to-human transplantations, or allotransplantations, have only been around since the 1950s. They are baby boomers, sports cars, and poodle skirts. The first successful operation being a kidney in 1954. Since then, scientists have been continuously working to get a successful animal-to-human transplant, but it has yet to happen. Though there have been blood vessels from cows used to replace damaged blood vessels in humans prior to the development of synthetic materials used to help with this. There have also been many successful operations involving pig valves for heart transplantations. In the 60s, the era of hippies, bell-bottoms, and psychedelic rock, a man by the name Keith Reemsma experimented with chimpanzee to human transplants, consisting of replacing kidneys for 13 patients. Unfortunately, most of them died within the first few weeks, but one, a teacher, withstood for 9 months and died from what was assumed an electrolyte disturbance. Now, let me tell you about pig xenotransplantations. See, pigs have molecules on their surfaces, including sugars and proteins that humans do not have. When a pig organ is transplanted into a human, the immune system recognizes these molecules as foreign and begins to attack the pig tissue, leading to immediate rejection of the organ. Because pigs and humans are genetically dissimilar, some of their proteins that serve similar functions have slight differences that also trigger an immune response. In like manner, the human vascular endothelium expresses the ABH blood group antigens, whereas a pig's vascular endothelium expresses a galactose-oligosaccharide. The presence of GAL in the pig and its absence in humans is what causes the human body to produce anti-GAL antibodies. When a pig organ is transplanted into a human, these antibodies immediately bind to the cells of the graft and activate complement, resulting in hyperacute rejection that occurs within minutes or hours. Unfortunately, not even the immunosuppressive drugs can control the immune rejection driven by the tissue incompatibility between pigs and humans. Now, if we could eliminate the differences between pigs and humans through genetic engineering, then the chances of rejection could be minimized. Think on this. The creation of genetically modified pigs could solve the problem of organ availability. And as a matter of fact, in 2002, the era of iPods and the first season of American Idol, scientists reported a generation of a cloned, genetically modified pig lacking a sugar molecule that normally stimulates a strong immune response. Since then, scientists have been generating pig immune cells that help human immune cells interact successfully with pig immune cells, and they have been generated in xenotransplantation models. The use of these modified or transgenic pigs as organ donors can help prevent the recipient's immune system from immediately rejecting the xenograft. The use of hearts and kidneys from these transgenic pigs have already greatly improved the survival rate in non-human primates. Today, a kidney may last for months, and a heart can survive for multiple years. However, primate recipients are still dependent on immunosuppressive medications to control the immune rejection. Unfortunately, these drugs have multiple negative side effects, including higher rates of cancer and infection. Another strategy of xenotransplantation is the tolerance approach. This tactic tricks the recipient's immune system into recognizing pig molecules as self by administering pig bone marrow into the patient prior to transplantation. Donor bone marrow contains progenitor immune cells, which can subsequently develop into mature immune cells in the recipient's body. These donor immune cells will not attack the transplanted organ because they recognize it as self. This method was first used successfully in human-to-human transplantation clinical trials at Massachusetts General Hospital. Patients who received donor bone marrow with a kidney transplant became tolerant, meaning that no immunosuppressive drugs were required for the kidney to function even 1 year after transplantation. Scientists are currently studying tolerance in a well-established pig to non-human primate xenotransplantation model. However, there are two major ethical concerns regarding xenografts. The concern that xenotransplantations will introduce viruses into the human population, and the concern that animals have the same rights as humans do and therefore should not be put to death, even if it saves human lives. The first issue concerning humans contracting viruses, no one truly knows the answer to. Virologists say that there's a likely possibility. On the contrary, many scientists see that there's a small chance of this occurring. According to U.S. Renal Data System 2003 annual report, 70% of all kidney transplant recipients experience an infection episode up to 3 years after transplantation. Regarding the second concern of animal rights, some small groups of people have put to question whether it is ethical to end an animal's life to save a human. The truth is, we as humans value our lives very much, and if it came down to it, we as the human population would be more willing to give up an animal life to save our own. As it is, we already use animals as food, clothing, and other products. Being ethical about the situation should be the main concern. So, whether you're accident prone or have a much more serious condition, no doubt, xenotransplantations are a cutting edge approach that could be considered with all its new scientific advancements, an option for future transplant. And who knows, the decade of 2020 could be known as the year of longer lives, flying cars, and successful xenotransplantations. Thank you.
Okay, so you said that currently they are not doing these xenotransplants from an animal to a human, correct?
They're testing it. There
They're
has
testing it
been
right
some,
now.
but there's not been any successful ones. Like in January of 2022, there was a guy who had diastolic heart failure, and they were trying to replace it with a pig heart. And they had genetically modified it with 10 different markers using a CRISPR machine to fit that man specifically. Unfortunately, there was cross-contamination within the operation room, and it failed because he had immunosuppressive drugs, and so the infection overtook.
Perfect, you answered my question, because I was gonna ask if there have been any trials on what that kind of looks like already.
So really, it could have, if there wasn't
Contamination,
malfunction
yes,
when they
ma'am.
were doing
Mhm.
it could have really worked.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it would be great, I mean, for something like that to be successful.
I agree.
So, so that's the one example, so there, you didn't run across any other trials or anything?
Not as close to a success as that one has been. Like they've tried, with the chimpanzee, but they saw that the kidneys were too small in order for a human body's blood to, be filtered out, and it caused electrolyte disturbance, and it flooded them and it killed them because of the backing up in it. And it's been kind of a foreign thing since then. People have kind of strayed away because it's not like it's kind of taboo to mess with, but that's the most recent one that I can think of that's been such like a close success.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you guys.
Perfect. Picture a nice Sunday afternoon. What are you doing? Taking a long afternoon nap? Or maybe watching the big game? A typical Sunday in shallow water consists of grabbing a quick sandwich, pulling on your mud boots, and heading out to the dairy. Every Sunday after church, our dairy team heads out to judge cows, look at heifers, and just see what's new. And over the past few years, the biggest difference has been the increase and effectiveness of technology. Today, we will be discussing the changes in the milking barn, how it is affecting the dairy industry, and what it means for the future of agriculture. Honestly, I was completely taken back the first time or two I toured a dairy. My favorite part is the milking barn, because it's where all of the action takes place. And as you can imagine, milking 2,000 cows 2 times a day is an incredible task that takes a lot of manpower and communication. And this is also where we're seeing the most amount of change take place. Our grandparents can recall milking a cow by hand, and it taking a solid 30 minutes. And that's not even taking into account the time it took them to clean and prepare the udder. Currently, we are seeing 40 cows milked in a maximum of 6 minutes. Talk about a world of change. Tejas Dunes and Enchanted Pasture Dairies are milking 2,000 cows every 5 hours. That would have been impossible back when you had to walk uphill both ways to school. Unfortunately, this is not good enough for our local dairymen, as the new trend in the dairy industry is the automatic milking machine. These machines eliminate the need for such a great workforce. Typically, you have 5 people in charge of all milking operations. 3 on the floor of the parlor, and 2 moving cows in and out. There is always a 6th person though, the dairy manager, who oversees the entire operation and is in charge of maintaining milk quality. With these systems, we're seeing that workforce can be cut in half easily, as the cows can now milk and move themselves. Now, I know, a herd of 2,000 cows being that self-sufficient sounds crazy, but it is possible and proving to be the new age in dairy farming. United States dairymen have already started to purchase the Fullwood or Lely designs for use on their facilities. These machines are modern-day robots that constantly milk and monitor cow health. These systems also reduce the need for a central milking parlor. Instead, you'll find several smaller milking units placed throughout the stalls of lactating cows. Now, cows are creatures of habit and know just what they want. We are able to track this habit through a transponder. This is a little black box worn as a necklace that contains all of the cow's personal identification, as well as communicates with the farmer and the milking unit. The Laley Astronaut was designed to accommodate for a cow's ease of living. This means when the animal is full of milk, she will know to make her way towards the machine. After she enters, the rear door closes and work begins. Step 1, the transponder is read to determine the last time the cow was milked. And simultaneously, infrared sensors are analyzing the udder to determine if she is full or not. If it is not milking time, the front door opens and the cow walks out. But if it is milking time, step 2 commences, cleaning and preparing the udder. Now this is possible through a laser-guided positioning arm. This is a moving arm with 2 rotating brushes to help clean and stimulate the udder for milk letdown. After this is complete, the arm is retracted and all 4 cups are placed on all 4 teats. And initially, each cup only pulls 9 milliliters of milk to strip the teat. This also gives a great opportunity for the milk to be tested. After this, the cow is fully milked, which takes about 8 to 9 minutes. And while this is happening, the flow rate is constantly being monitored. And if flow rate drops, suction stops and the cups drop. While all of this is taking place, in the milk glass, the milk is being tested to be under the legal limit of 400,000 somatic cell count and show no signs of mastitis. And if it does in fact show no signs of mastitis and is under that legal limit, the milk is sent to the bulk tank. If it does not meet these requirements, the milk is dumped and the farmer is notified of the cow's health issue. With these systems, we're seeing 90 cows milked in just 1 hour. Adding another advancement to the dairy industry is the implementation of waterbeds. I know, waterbeds, cows, where's the correlation? But after touring T&K Dairy, we saw firsthand just how beneficial these beds can be. And let me tell you, they look so comfortable, I was tempted to go lay on one. Now, if you're like me, you've got 1,000 questions. Like, really? A cow likes that? Or does it ever freeze? Does it ever pop? It's actually super simple and quite ingenious. Each DCC, dual chamber cow waterbed, is built from 4 layers of vulcanized rubber, reinforced with nylon, so they're virtually impossible to tear or burst. The dual chamber design allows for the front half of the bed to be filled independently of the rear. This allows the bed to conform to the overall size and scale of the unique animal. Now, for the fun part. I want you to imagine yourself laying on a waterbed, just feeling yourself sinking into the mattress. Obviously, this is better on your joints, right? Well, it's the same for the cattle, and they love it. And we all know that happy cows produce better milk. There is no doubt that the way our grandparents raised and marketed animals is changing. As advancements are being made in the dairy industry, producers are finding that there's more to life than working around the clock. And after visiting with Mr. Collier, he emphasized that producers are seeing more of a work-life balance. Typically, these people are up there for a solid 12 hours a day. Now, they're able to rely more on the machines and less on faulty hired hands. The data also shows an increase in profitability. A study in 2015 shows that with these systems, milk yields increased by 2,000 pounds per cow annually. They also add a more monetary value as they keep the cows healthier, which in turn means that the farmer has to spend less on curing that animal. After seeing how the Laley Astronaut works, I am super excited to see what the next advancement in the dairy industry will be. Dairies like T&K are paving the way for the future. Producers are constantly trying to come up with new and better ways to keep cows comfortable and profitable. After all, who would have thought we'd have cows hanging out on waterbeds? Thank you.
I've got a question. So these milking systems, did you come up with any prices of what this would cost a dairy farmer?
Yes, ma'am. This price can reach upwards of $8 million on the initial investment. This is because the upfront cost of a Laley Astronaut is $200,000. And when you remember the fact that the average dairy in Texas houses 2,000 cattle, This means you'll need 30 machines, which will make up 6 million of that total 8 million. You also need to remember, however, that the barn and infrastructure behind the dairy will cost you a whopping $1.5 million, and on average, each water bed costs you $300 per bed. That is what gets you to that total of $8 million, which would be that initial investment. Fortunately, Lely partners with financial institutions like Capital Farm Credit, and they will sell you a used or service model for a cheaper price. And in fact, Mr. Collier of T&K Dairy did just that. He financed his robotic dairy through Capital Farm Credit, and he told us they made the process so much easier, and his return on investment was just 5 years.
So is there, I know you mentioned that most dairies in Texas have that 2,000 operating, where they've got 2,000 head, but what, would that be the minimum that you would recommend having that type of technology, or how is it cost effective for those smaller dairy farms that don't necessarily have that many head of cattle? Or would they probably not?
Yes, ma'am. So I believe that it is a cost-effective way to produce their milk in a smaller or a larger dairy. One Lely Astronaut can house anywhere from 60 to the max of 75 cows for one machine. The average will be 60, just to make sure that it is available to those cows whenever they need it. Even with a smaller dairy, that just means that the initial investment will be lower, and it will increase their profits over time more. The return on investment for Mr. Collier's 2,000 head of cattle was just 5 years. So if you were to have 1,000 cattle, this would mean that by that number, you would only have a return of investment in 2.5 years. And with the Lely Astronaut decreasing the amount of labor purchased within the dairy industry by 29%, this is increasing your profits there, as well in the electricity that is being spent to run a traditional parlor rather than a robotic parlor.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Go ahead and start.
All right. 2 operating rooms, 2 prayers, 1 answer. In operating room 1, we have Katie, a 16-year-old high school student who is in the hospital because she was in a major car accident. Her injuries are life-threatening and the prognosis is grim. Her doctors have worked tirelessly to save her life, and her parents have spent their days on their knees praying for a miracle, for God to save their baby girl. In operating room 2, we have Bobby, an 18-year-old high school senior who is in the hospital because he is awaiting a heart transplant. He was born with a defect, and his conditions have worsened over the years to the point of a critical status. The only answer to saving his life is receiving a donor heart. Soon. Very soon. Bobby's parents have also spent their days praying for a much-needed organ donor. Now, Bobby's parents have been informed that there is a young lady in the hospital who proves to be a match, but the coming days will determine his and her destiny. Can you imagine the scenario? Katie and Bobby's parents in the same hospital chapel, both praying for their babies? Unfortunately, in order for one child to live, the other must die. It just doesn't seem right, does it? Hi, my name is Riley Whitaker, and today I'm going to tell you about the medical timeline of xenotransplantation, how xenotransplantation, when paired with genetic modification and cloning, can close the supply and demand gap for organ availability, and why we as agriculturists should advocate for this new option in the medical field. 114,000. That is currently the number of individuals on the waiting list for an organ transplant. Think about it, 114,000. And out of that heart-stopping figure, less than 34,000 transplants are performed each year. A new name is added to the list every 10 minutes. Every single day, 20 people die waiting on an organ transplant. The numbers are staggering, and the supply and demand for organ availability is growing further and further apart with every passing year. This is a problem. But what if I told you that through the advancements of science, technology, and agriculture, we can solve this dilemma? What if I told you the answer did not require the passing of another human being? The answer, you ask? Xenotransplantation, or the transfer of organs between species. As we visit the timeline of xenotransplantation, it is interesting to note that cross-species transplants have been documented since the 17th century. In 1667, a French doctor tapped into the veins of a sheep to perform a blood transfusion in order to save the life of his 15-year-old patient. In the 1900s, xenotransplantation gained much notoriety. In 1964, a surgeon transplanted a chimpanzee kidney into a patient who lived 9 months with the help of immunosuppressant drugs. In 1984, Dr. Leonard Bailey transplanted a baboon heart into baby Faye, an infant who was born with a poorly developed heart. The most exciting advancement comes from a Boston-based company called Xenotherapeutics. In 2018, the FDA gave Xenotherapeutics the green light to proceed with the very first human clinical trial, in which genetically engineered porcine skin would be used to treat severe burn victims in the Massachusetts General Hospital. Although this trial is still ongoing, November 2022 preliminary results are promising. Thus far, 0 patients have shown adverse effects, and there are no distinguishable differences between the human and porcine skin. Now, you may be asking yourselves, why Xenotherapeutics decided to use porcine skin as opposed to other animals? The use of pigs as preferred models for research, development, and surgical practice is common because the porcine genome and physical structure is most like that of humans. And this brings me to my second point. When xenotransplantation is paired with genetic modification and cloning, the possibilities are endless. We as humans, and specifically Bobby in the scenario I have presented to you today, are in dire need of an answer when human organs are just not available. The answer may be closer than we can even imagine. Step 1 in this process is genetic modification. Genetic modification, in simple terms, is the alteration of the genome or genetic makeup of an animal. In this case, scientists are able to remove strands of DNA that could potentially cause diseases or rejection issues. In essence, the genome is tweaked or altered in order to create the perfect model that would be suitable for xenotransplantation. Step 2 is cloning. According to Transovagenetics, a clone is a genetic twin to an existing animal, just born at a different location in time. Now, the exact process of cloning gets a bit more involved. The first step is to collect the tissue sample from a donor animal. This is as simple as taking a notch out of an ear. Then the cells from the donor tissue are allowed to grow and then fuse together with an oocyte that has had the nucleus removed. The resulting embryos are then transferred into a recipient mother. Afterwards, a normal pregnancy ensues. Cloning allows us to mass produce the perfect model over and over in order to close the enormous supply and demand gap for organ availability. Imagine having enough animal organs available so that there is never a shortage. However, the most prominent obstacle we must overcome is lack of education and a negative public perception. Understandably so, the initial response of the general public is one that squints and winces at the thought of having an animal organ being placed inside their body. However, a recent survey conducted by the National Kidney Foundation revealed that with explanation and knowledge, 75% of the people surveyed agreed that they would be open to xenotransplantation if human organs were not available. The key to this survey? Education. So it is up to us, as agriculturists and supporters of the greatest industry in the world, to provide options, knowledge, and a positive perception for the work being done in the field of agricultural biotechnology. So join me in advocating for this cause so that it may be presented as an option one day for those who need it most. As I close, I would like to venture back to the story I told you earlier of the 2 teenagers, Katie and Bobby. I told you that in order for one child to live, the other must die. As Katie and Bobby's parents were praying, do you ever think they considered the answer to their problem to be a farm animal? Probably not. However, through the advancements of science, technology, and agriculture, stories such as the one I shared with you today could be obsolete in a few short years. What a miraculous day it will be when we no longer have to depend on the loss of one life to save another. Agricultural biotechnology has the ability to change the ending to someone's story. Who knows, one day you might find yourself saying, "The greatest hero I never knew was the pig that saved my life." Thank you.
Okay, I know you focus mainly on the skin transplants, but before that you made a comment about an infant getting a chimpanzee heart. Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am. A baboon heart was transplanted into baby Faye.
And was that successful?
Yes, ma'am. So what they did was baby Faye was born with a poorly developed heart, like I said. And so what they did was they took the porcine pericardium to make her a new valve for her heart. And so they transplanted that baboon heart into baby Faye. And she lived 21 days with the help of immunosuppressant drugs. And that was in 1984. And I believe that if this would have happened, if she would have been born maybe 20 years later, that they would have had more technology that would have helped with the lifelong success of this baby living.
As you were doing this research on the xenotransplants, were there any dollar figures thrown out there on what the costs are looking like on this?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm not really sure exactly how much on the xenotransplantation side, just because it's so new and that's something that they're still working out. Since it's not FDA approved yet, they can't really put a price to it. But with the cloning side of things and the mass production, I know that with conventional cloning at Transova Genetics to clone a show cow or a dog, it's around $20,000. But when I was researching this and thinking about a price, what came to mind is, can you really put a price on a person's life? So if that was your life or your loved one's life at stake, it probably would be worth it to take that extra money to save their life instead of letting them be one of those 20 people that were dying every day on that transplant list. Do y'all have any other questions?
That's it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. This C.S. Lewis quote has become second nature to me since I was in elementary. As I become more and more immersed in the agricultural and equine industry, I find that this quote has a quality that is desired by leaders in every sector. But recent conversations have brought up the questions. As leaders in our industry, how do we always know what is right? Are we upholding the correct standards? Is this how it should be done? So many questions and more. But no matter the industry, breed association, or organization, there is a right answer. Good afternoon. My name is Gracie Potter, and today we are going to tackle an issue that the equine industry has been facing for quite some time now. Equine reproductive methods, more specifically artificial insemination, and its legality in our equine livestock. We will be able to look at two firmly written policies of both the Thoroughbred and AQHA Association, and how these policies are a cause of hesitation and concern for those wishing to advance the breed using advancements in technology. Many horsemen often struggle with the what is right when choosing a breeding method for their horse. However, the underlying problem that the horse industry has been facing for quite some time now is that not all organizations are in support of advancements in technology. In fact, some ban people from practicing such innovative ways that have been deemed safer and better for our equine friends. The most notable exception to particular breeding restrictions is the thoroughbred racing industry. More specifically, the Jockey Club, which is the governed association of thoroughbred breed registries. Yes, that's right. The thoroughbred racing industry does not support advancements in technology. Furthermore, the Jockey Club, established in 1894, was conceptualized to maintain the integrity of the American Stud Book. This book states that artificial insemination is expressly prohibited, and that any foal resulting from the process of artificial insemination, embryo transfer, embryo transplant, cloning, or any other form of genetic manipulation shall not be eligible for registration. This is clearly defined in Section 5 of the American Stud Book's principles, rules, and requirements. Even more specifically, to be eligible to register your foal as a thoroughbred, the foal must be a direct result of a stallion physically mounting and breeding with a broad mare, and that natural gestation must take place in and delivered from the same body in which the foal was conceived in. The Jockey Club did this to maintain the genetic diversity within their association as it grows in numbers and in quantity. When we take into account that in 2021, the Jockey Club registered 17,840 thoroughbreds in the United States, it makes it clear that foals must be genuine and authentic to the breed. With the U.S. population of thoroughbreds being approximately 1.1 million, only 14% of these are registered with the Jockey Club. Now, when you think of a thoroughbred, you should be envisioning a tall, statured horse with a neck piece of red roses and a jockey atop of it. You should think of horses like Secretariat, Seabiscuit, or Man of War, all of which are true award-winning horses that have won millions of dollars. So, when we bring up the conversation of breeding, you can only imagine the topics and issues that are brought to the table. When utilizing live coverage, one stallion can service up to 140 mares per respective breeding season, as stated by this policy. This opens up the door for numerous types of parasitic, respiratory, and sexually transmitted diseases. Furthermore, it is much harder and more expensive to shuttle around famous stallions. So, what is right? While the risk of the horse's health is put on the line, only utilizing live coverage helps maintain the genetic diversity within the association. While this is deemed right on one hand, the AQHA began changing their long-standing policies. Prior to 2002, the AQHA only allowed foals that were conceived under live coverage, and one mare was only allotted one embryo transfer or foal per year. However, after the court case, the AQHA now deems that artificial insemination and embryo transfer are an acceptable form of breeding. The AQHA versus K. Foyd, a horse breeder, highlighted that the AQHA violated the Texas Free Trade and the state antitrust laws. This was backed by attorney Robert Gerner, who brought forth evidence that proved that his clients lost between $9.5 and $10 million in the value of their horses, and another $3 million in profits because of the embryo transfer law. If the AQHA would have gone on with this policy, they would have had to pay millions in damages and not been able to register case horses. Instead of paying this money, the AQHA now deems that artificial insemination is an acceptable form of breeding that is supported by their association. Their policy now states that any foal resulting from artificial insemination, embryo transfer, embryo transplant, or cloning must have its pedigree verified by any form that the AQHA deems necessary. Knowing that the value of the Texas and U.S. equine industry must be maintained, the AQHA now deems that what is right is utilizing advancements in technology. But why? From the outside in, it seems like such a simple, yes, we should AI, because it is the safest, most cost-effective, and successful form of breeding. However, from the outside in, there are a few things we need to keep in mind. Contenders of AI worry that a shrinking gene pool would occur, since there is no limit on the number of mares a stallion can impregnate each year. We now have horses dominating certain disciplines, like Metallic Cat in the cutting industry, with over 380 money-earning offspring in 2021. This $5 million sire has impregnated over 300 mares per year since 2013. So that brings up the question again, what is right? President Truman can be quoted saying that doing the right thing is easy. It is much more difficult to figure out what the right thing is. This statement could not be any more true for our situation. Thankfully, both the thoroughbred and AQHA policies have a strong, proven foundation to stand upon. Ultimately, they both uphold the best of their breed and continue to drive a $122 billion industry. Today, I leave the question to you. Live coverage or artificial insemination? The choice is yours, but you must do what is right. Thank you.
Okay, Gracie, so now we're gonna have about 3 minutes worth of questions, okay? Gracie, so you talked a lot about what is right? Should we be AIing? Should we do live coverage only? In your opinion, what is the best way?
I think that we need to find a good balance between both of these policies. I think that we should allow artificial insemination, but up to a point. Kind of like the live coverage policy, you can only breed 140 mares per respected breeding season. So I think we should institute this policy, but allow artificial insemination. What this means is that artificial insemination would be allowed, but only a stallion could reproduce with so many mares per year.
What would the advantage of being registered with these different groups, one over the other, if the rules are different between them? Are there advantages, or fill me into the horse world here?
Yes, ma'am. So the thoroughbred and the jockey club is much more of a racing industry. We see horses doing dressage on the racetrack or much more sporting events, while the AQHA does more of your disciplines that involves English and Western saddles. So that's hunter hack, hunter under saddle, Western pleasure, kind of stuff like that. There is no really advantages of going into either association. It is ultimately up to what kind of horse you have and what it is bred for.
Gracie, I'm a cattle person. I'm going to be quite honest with you. And we definitely recommend that people AI everything because there are certain bulls in certain states. I can't breed my cattle too because there's no way I'm going to be able to cover that cost. How would you argue that we can combat the cost of live coverage of these animals?
Live coverage is very costly because you have to ship these horses to physically breed with these broad mares. And there really isn't a certain way that we can combat this cost, because no matter what, you're still going to be transporting these horses to this physical mare. So ultimately the cost depends onto the horse's owners of how this product is utilized, but ultimately it's up to the breeders, and we really don't have a way to set a minimum.
In all of your research, did you find that what we do in America is comparable to anywhere else, or are they doing it differently, better?
Yes, ma'am. Both of these associations are worldwide. The Jockey Club covers Australia, England, all over the place, and so does the AQHA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready.
The cool morning air stings your lungs as you inhale and exhale, taking deep breaths as you make your way to the back pasture. It's spring, and that means calving season. Your eyes carefully scan the acres tinged with green and brown until you find what you're looking for: your prized heifer in labor. But as you ride up to her, you can see that she's in pain. She's weakened and bloody. It's obvious she's been struggling for hours on end. Your conscience eats away at you as you watch her labored breathing get shallower. And yet, you're forced to do nothing but turn your back, mount your horse, and ride away. Some might say that the solution to your guilty conscience is simple. Just assist her in her birthing process. Pull her calf, stitch her up, and send her on her way. However, there was new legislation being presented that threatened your right and ability to help that heifer. Initiative 16, also known as the PAWS Act, was a ballot initiative proposed in Colorado in 2021 that aimed to redefine the way in which America interacts with and implements animal husbandry. According to Initiative 16, touching an animal's genitals in any way is sexual abuse. It also states that, in no uncertain terms, that a farmer, rancher, or veterinarian could be convicted of such a crime based merely off of unsubstantiated accusations, with the line, "A sexual act may be proven without allegation or proof of penetration," and that the slaughtering age should be restricted to no less than 1/4 of an animal's natural lifespan. Although Initiative 16 did not end up on a ballot, to the relief of many Coloradan agricultural institutions, other legislation and a narrative that's values align with it has the potential to cause more and more wary cowboys to simply ride away. Let's discuss some points on what a bill like this would actually do to the livestock industry. First, it would negatively impact the breeding side of the industry, especially when it comes to humans being involved in animal reproduction, as in AI, IVF, embryo transfer, and the collection of semen, just to name a few. We all understand that breeding is a huge part of the industry economically, and a bill like this would cause a domino effect that would make the job pool of people in the breeding sector very small. Stock quality will go down if we don't get to control what, and breed standards will inevitably tank. Not only is this a huge blow to the industry financially, but it's also a threat to animal welfare. For example, artificial insemination is healthier and less risky for both the females and the males in these scenarios. It prevents the spread of STDs, sterility, and it allows the breeder to control when and where the female is impregnated in order to monitor her closely. Now, this is where we see the irony come into play. In an effort to prevent animal cruelty and to promote animal wellness, the proponents of this bill are actually increasing the risk of injury and fatality in the thousands of animals that birth out every breeding season. Therefore, we have to ask ourselves the question, are these people really committed to the betterment of animal lives? Or is this just shallow, performative activism backed by agricultural ignorance? Agricultural ignorance appears to be the reasoning behind this initiative. In regards to the slaughtering rule, let's think about this practically and use the example of beef cattle in the US. The natural lifespan of the average beef breed is around 15 to 20 years, give or take. This would mean that we could not even start slaughtering calves until they reach age 4 or 5. And as we all know, most calves are slaughtered well before they hit 2. This change would mean chaos, and not just for ranchers, but for breeders, backgrounders, feedlots, producers, consumers, and everyone else involved in the production of American beef. Meat quality would go down due to aging, causing a drop in prices which would negatively affect the economy, as America produced 28.3 billion pounds of beef in 2022 alone. Looking at it less from the financial side of things and more from a side filled with compassion brings me to my next point, which is the importance of an animal's health and your rights as a livestock owner to administer proper care. Preg checks are necessary in all livestock to ensure healthy pregnancy, especially in that of mare and foal, cow and calf, etc. Besides just preg checks, female livestock can develop ovarian cancer and cysts. Stallions and bulls can develop testicular cancer, and there are a myriad of other genital diseases that require the owner to actually physically inspect the genitals in order to diagnose. Now, according to Initiative 16, all of that is technically rape. When you and I go to the doctor, we give our consent to be inspected and examined for the good of our health, of course. However, as livestock cannot do this, it's up to us as the owners to step up and make those decisions for them. And it's not a burden that any of us take lightly. Using the reproductive example, livestock have always experienced dystocia, or difficult birth. Over the years, however, we've developed advanced methods of helping livestock achieve healthier, higher birth rates. We have the ability to sterilize our surgical instruments, clean palpation gloves, and mountains of reference material made by the foremost experts in animal patrician. However, if a bill like this were to be passed, we would be back at square one when it comes to assisted delivery. There would be no C-sections, no controlled vaginal deliveries, and probably not even fetotomies to remove dead fetuses. So once again, the question remains. Is it really welfare if we, who are knowledgeable and capable, cannot help those who cannot help themselves? While this topic understandably receives very emotional reactions, I think we can all take a step back and recognize that there are two sides to this story. However, Initiative 16 uses confusing language in regards to what is okay to do versus what is deemed inappropriate. So how do we know when to stop, and what's the solution? I'm not saying that animal abuse is not a very real issue that needs to be dealt with. Between 2011 and 2015, there were 259 bestiality arrests on abuse charges in the US. Obviously, sexual acts with animals are 100% wrong. That is not the fact that's being contested here. Therefore, we need to try and lay our emotions aside and find common ground with activist groups and policymakers. Because in the end, our goals really should be the same. Bettering animal lives, speaking up and educating about the things that are going on around us, and putting an end to real, substantiated animal abuse. I believe that this is the key to helping the industry and the animals that we all love to keep on prospering. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna have about 3 minutes for questions. All right, so my first question is going to be, obviously we know that there's going to be a lot of negative thoughts regarding this.
Absolutely.
So as an agriculture science teacher, how can I have my students buy into this and be true believers about what you're speaking about?
I think you're in a great position, actually. My solution to all of this, every time I'm asked, is education. So I think you, as an ag science teacher, have a great opportunity to instill these values within students. But I understand where you're coming from, how in a classroom that's not necessarily a 100% ag setting, there are probably students who believe the other way, who would side with Initiative 16. And again, I really think it comes down to looking at the facts. If you sit down and write out the facts about this initiative, write out the facts about animal husbandry and true animal welfare, 100% of the facts are on the side of the farmer, the rancher, and the agriculturist. So I think it looks like approaching it logically and saying, instead of fighting and trying to jump over this wall, breaking down that wall and saying, hey, like I said at the end of my speech, our goal should be the same. As agriculturists, it's our job to care about animal welfare. So we want the same thing as you. We just want to make sure we're attacking the right people instead of the people whose job it is to have animals live good lives.
As someone who's from Colorado and got to hear about all this firsthand,
I'm sure.
I appreciate your approach to it, and I would follow up the education with advocacy. And how would you recommend, or how are you personally an advocate educating, not in a classroom, but outside of it?
You know, I think we live in a unique day and age, and at the same time, social media can be great, and it can also be a detriment to what we do and to our advocacy practices. So a lot of this misinformation, I see it all the time on my social media, this sort of mindset, maybe not exactly Initiative 16, but a mindset and a way of looking at things that reflects this. So I think that using those spaces, taking up a presence in those spaces, being known, having our voices be heard is the first step. I mean, the first step of anything in this is being able to just kind of plant that seed in somebody else's mind of, you know what, maybe I should look at the other side. Just as we should, so should other people as well. So I think utilizing our resources in that way. Also, me personally, you've heard the dates in this speech. This initiative was proposed in 2021. There have since been several similar ballot initiatives proposed in states like Oregon last year and this year, and there's currently one on Oregon's ballot for the 2024 general election. So me giving this speech, I've given it for over a year now. I've been able to speak it at several major shows and be able to speak in front of several crowds. And I always have people come up and approach me afterwards saying that they had no clue that this was going on in the first place. So using a speech like this with the facts that is backed up scientifically has helped me spread the word.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, ladies. It's great speaking with you today. Thank you so much.
Whenever you're ready.
Do you remember that feeling when the realtor slid the papers across the desk to face you? Your hand shaking due to those excited nerves as you grasped the pen tightly and signed on the dotted line. Your signature opening the door to the house that you would now call home. Home looks a little different for everyone. Maybe for you it's that new house that you just signed the closing documents to. Maybe it's the fields of row crop that stretch as far as the eye can see, where you spend every possible daylight hour preparing for harvest. The rolling acres of property where you raise livestock to put food on the table. Or maybe it's even that inherited land that's been in your family for generations. Home is where the heart is. And as a landowner, you are able to reap all of the benefits of the work that you have sown for that property's improvement, as well as all of the natural benefits that that property produces. Welcome to America, land of the free, where we have rights and freedoms unlike most other countries, including the right to own property. However, purchasing a piece of land comes with not only the title to that property, but also all of the challenges derived from eminent domain. Good afternoon, my name is Elise Sharp of the Bowling FFA chapter, and today I'm here speaking to you on the effects of eminent domain on private property landowners. Eminent domain, the right to expropriate private property for public use. About 95% of the land in Texas is privately owned, according to Julie Tomasek of the Texas Farm Bureau. That's a big percentage, and the rights to it are constantly being fought over. Texas stays hungry for new development, and this land, your land,
unlocks numerous development opportunities if the government can get their hands on it, regardless of the size of the property. At any moment, they can come in, decide they have a public use for your land, and poof, just like that, you now have many trials and obstacles in front of you to fight for your rights and your property. The worst part is landowners aren't just negatively affected by one season. This land will forever be part of the new development, manipulated for generations to come. The only possible benefit here is an opportunity to walk away with some serious cash in your pocket, equivalent to what your property is worth, since the state is obligated to compensate you. Sounds like fair enough trade, right? Well, unfortunately, the positives end there. While previously the right of eminent domain belonged solely to the state government, over time this power has expanded to allow private companies to condemn property for what is deemed to be a public purpose. In a survey conducted by Texans for Property Rights, almost 60% of respondents said that their taking was by a private company, not a governmental entity. When these companies come in to use your land for new development, such as pipelines, road expansion, high voltage transmission lines, drainage systems, and railroads, these companies are known for taking advantage of private property landowners. Many companies have reputations of making lowball offers in hopes that the landowner will accept the first deal without ever facing any penalty or ramifications. Marissa Patton, Texas Farm Bureau Associate Legislative Director, says, Texas statute gives landowners very little leverage within the negotiation process to entice a fair deal from the entity seeking their property. Eventually, if the landowner remains unconvinced that their offer is fair, their only choice is to settle or be sued. In the condemnation context, this is a forced sale. Even if you don't think you have a fair deal, you don't get to say no. Contrary to the constitutional protection that you have, the issue of fairness ends up becoming the issue of getting the most money that they'll pay, or getting the most money from a decision maker. Not only will they not compensate you fairly, but they will not treat you fairly. Landowner protections are often purposely left out of contracts and only added after protests by the landowner. Without these landowner protections, companies have nothing stopping them from improperly using easement agreements and abusing the property. And the landowner has no way to fight back when the company dumps debris wherever convenient, utilizes areas of land not permissible for their use, blocks access to portions of your property, or even tries to come in and later take more than their allotted acreage. This battle is one that is fought close to home. When traveling to the Rosenberg-Houston area, my eyes are immediately drawn to the major construction due to the State Highway 36 corridor project that runs south of Meadville to the Brazoria County line. Since September of 2018, I have watched as both home and business owners have become unable to access their own driveways, forcing them to lose business, and many have had to relocate entirely. While this construction project is estimated to last 40 months, I believe these landowners will be facing challenges indefinitely once the lanes of traffic have been expanded to reach their front doors. Similarly, my own community members within Wharton County have faced incredible devastation due to the Kinder Morgan crossover pipeline project, defacing emotional connections, income, and speaking from personal experience, the hopes of future generations. So are we just gonna sit back and watch this unfair treatment happen? What else is there to do? How do we make a change in the world around us? The good news is you and I are not the only people that have identified this problem. There are thousands across the state working towards reform and legislation. The 88th Texas Legislature session just began on January 10th, 2023, and eminent domain is on the agenda. In the 2021 session, Governor Greg Abbott signed multiple bills pertinent to eminent domain that went into effect as of the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022. House Bill 2730 amends several sections to the Texas Government Code and the Texas Property Code concerning the rights of landowners and obligations of condemning authorities seeking to use those statutory eminent domain powers. This bill looks to offer the most benefits and protections for landowners against both private companies and governmental agencies. We are currently evaluating how those additions improves the condemnation process. As Americans and Texans, we continue to face battles associated with eminent domain due to unjust compensation, improper use of easement agreements, and abuse of property. However, we are not alone. We are resilient and will join together to educate ourselves on how eminent domain affects landowners and how to find a solution to the turmoil it causes. Join me and let's take back the privilege of being a landowner that is so greatly valued here in our home country and the great Lone Star State. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna have about 3 minutes worth of questions. Okay. So my first question is, what can you, as a high school student, do to fight against these forced sales, if you will?
Okay, so eminent domain is obviously a clear issue, and we've established that, and it's everywhere. And there's essentially nothing that we can do about it because growing, our population is growing, and we have to account for that. So as a high school student, I have become very invested in this. Eminent domain has affected my family land. We have a pipeline running through the land that I'm supposed to inherit one day, and so that's why it has become important to me. And so I've been writing this speech and being able to take it places and educate my judges and the people that listen to me about this issue, because ultimately I feel like that's our biggest problem that we're facing. It's just the lack of knowledge and the lack of education for landowners. And eventually, after I graduate college, I hope to I'm going to be majoring in ag economics next year, and my ultimate goal is to become an agricultural attorney that works with eminent domain cases and educates landowners.
Thank you.
I think it's always important to see both sides of the issue. So what would you say a positive of eminent domain is?
So eminent domain, like I said, it's necessary. Highway 36, that big corridor project, it's causing a lot of destruction, but it's necessary. They're expanding that highway for like hurricane evacuation, things like that. We need more space. We have all these people and they have nowhere to go. So there are definitely cases where it's necessary and where it's needed. The problem is that landowners aren't being treated justly and they're not being compensated adequately, and so that's the battle that we're trying to face.
So you mentioned, unfortunately, that your family land is some of this affected
Yes, ma'am.
Land, and then you also talked about Wharton County. Can you tell me of some of the largest affected areas of this in Texas?
So pipeline is the biggest issue that we're facing. A lot of the land in Texas is being affected by a pipeline. There's over 100,000 miles worth of pipeline on Texas soil. And so that's what we're facing a lot. There are some more current issues that are not pipelines. So there was a bullet train project that was going to be going from Houston to Dallas. A lot of people were affected by this. That was something that they had to go through eminent domain proceedings on to acquire the land for that. And so that would be another example of a larger scale case.
Do you have any questions?
Okay. Yes, thank you for your time.
Whenever you are ready and the door closes.
Good. Alright, my name is Will Muck. I'm representing Do Not Be Fooled, the ambiguity of agricultural product labels. The sun is rising. She steps outside to the fresh morning sun warm her feathers after a chilly night roosting in her spacious coop. There are acres of green pasture ahead of her, full of treasures, insects, seeds, and earthworms. Her first morning exercise? Waddling over to a calmly flowing brook of fresh mountain spring water. She feels blessed to be a free-range chicken. But then the rooster crows. She wakes up to the reality of what the U.S. Department of Agriculture has labeled as a free-range chicken that is simply access to an outside space. She wakes up as she forgets her dream, hops from her roost, and gets behind the line of the other clam chickens to go into her pasture. A small dirt square only big enough for a single chicken at a time. When eggs are labeled as free range, many consumers think of the dream of this chicken. While it may be true for many chickens, thankfully, Knowing that free range only means access to an outside space as big as a single chicken can motivate us to get educated on what these labels truly mean. There are many serious information gaps in agriculture and illiteracy in our society, so these labels are simply trusted. Many consumers don't even think to question them, blindly accepting what they read or hear as true. Consumers can fall into the trap of believing certain labels mean things that don't often match reality. They can believe that these labels are better not only for their own health and well-being, but also for the land and animals farmed. And so, our grocery carts are filled with terms such as non-GMOs, antibiotic and hormone-free, free range. But do these labels mean anything if they're not clearly and universally defined? And do they mean anything if the claims behind them, are they always true? This speech claims that agricultural product labels, such as organic, natural, and non-GMOs, are not always what they appear to be. The ambiguity of agricultural product labels fools the consumer. I will first highlight some examples of ambiguous labeling, discuss the effects of these ambiguous labels, and then suggest responsibilities of producers and consumers in writing this. An average consumer who would be more likely to be attracted to chicken, meat, or eggs labeled hormone-free, antibiotic-free, and free range is assuming certain statements to be true. Hormone-free chicken is better, antibiotic-free chicken is safer, and imagine chickens free to range like the chicken in our store. However, all three of these are often misconstrued. Every animal produces hormones just like humans, and the administration of growth hormones already not legal in the United States. In reality, the USDA inspects all meat for antibiotic residue. The consumer has little to no idea that all antibiotic and hormone-free meat is all meat within the United States. Marketers are in a sense taking this bad quality and claiming that they're the ones solving for it. As mentioned earlier, free range does not necessarily mean what comes to mind. Consumers are fooled by these ambiguous labeling, thinking that these labels are special. Three other hot topic terms include non-GMOs, organic, and natural. Well, what do these labels entail? First, our supermarket aisles are filled with this term called natural. However, natural has no clear legal definition whatsoever. So natural can be marketed however the marketers so please. The other term, GMOs, was originally created to prevent insect-resistant crops, which in turn causes farmers to use fewer insecticides. As with the other topics discussed, each GMO crop has been tested by multiple independent worldwide organizations conducting over 1,000 studies spanning 2 decades. And no, it has not been sufficiently proven to change someone's genes, so they're really not as scary as they're made out to be. The other term, organic, prides itself on being environmentally friendly, but often fails to tell the whole story. Organic farming still allows the use of certain synthetic or biological pesticides. These pesticides are used at a higher rate to protect crops because they are less effective. These pesticides can still cause health problems. Soil erosion may also increase as tillage and cultivation have to be used even more. Granted, there are benefits to these terms, but consumers are just blindly following them, not knowing what it means to each producer. Well, do any of these ambiguous labels have any real-world noticeable implications for the consumer? Well, yes. When it comes to organic, buyers are willing to spend 7 to 82% more. The same onion that would go for, let's say, 98 cents, is instead going for $2.99, which is a 205% increase. GMOs, on the other hand, buyers are willing to spend 10 to 62% more. After a law was passed in Vermont regarding the labeling of non-GMOs, the cost of the average consumers associated with this change could be as high as $3.8 billion. And according to data from the Wall Street Journal, the food label natural brought in $40 billion in retail sales. But as mentioned earlier, natural is not clearly or legally defined. Throughout this speech, I have shown examples of ambiguous labeling and then impacted out in cost-related ways. Well, who is responsible for writing this? First, the FDA and USDA need to consider adjusting criteria to reduce a lack of accountability in product labeling. Producers are currently finding loopholes in this current criteria. Producers must be held accountable for their marketing claims. Consumers also must become knowledgeable, resisting blindly following certain terms or trends. Improving agriculture literacy through educations of communities and in schools is extremely important. The consumer must make sure they're not being deceived. In conclusion, agricultural product labels should include only clearly and universally defined terms, or else they will lose all their meaning, bamboozling the educated consumer and angering the ones who are deceived. After our sleepy hen warms her feather in that fresh morning sun and breathes that fresh air in her small 12-inch outdoor space she hops into her nesting box and lays an egg. Free range? Only in her dreams. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna have about 3 minutes worth of questions. My first question is, can you tell me what the 10 GMO crops that are grown in the United States are?
No, ma'am, I do not know exactly, but I know, I can guess it's probably going to be a lot of the major crops that are for food generally in the world, because they're generally used because the GMOs are stronger because they were created in this way to be able to feed the general population. So a lot of the major crops you see are going to be specifically genetically modified in like a lab or such.
You mentioned improving ag literacy. Obviously, 4-H, FFA, those are great programs. What would you suggest in a setting where 4-H, FFA are not prominent in that area or available to promote an ag literacy for students or adults?
Right, so I'll just start like schools. So let's just say like it doesn't have to be like major or anything big. I know there's different like ag and classroom materials where it's just simply like they'll have a different mom or someone come in and read about agriculture, just dosing these kids in it. You can also start, I've heard plenty of examples of small herb gardens in classrooms, just kind of getting the feel, getting to do that, like specifically in cities where you don't really have that much of an option. So there's a lot of different resources out there. I know, for example, the San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo offers school tours, so that's also education in that way. So I would say the biggest part is starting with the younger generation, but then it's also expanding to the adults. They almost kind of get through that, and you can do different opportunities as for the adults in different community-related ways.
Okay, I have another question. So you touched on this, and I think it's really important, so I want to expand on it. What, in your opinion, should be the standard for labeling on these products?
Right, exactly. So I would say, or I'm just gonna start with free range because that was the main I started mine, so running off with that. So free range chickens, for example, should at least, it's almost gotten to the point where it was just like, okay, we'll give you free range if it's just outside space, because that's traditionally, but it's always gonna kind of be narrowed down. So it needs to be at least enough, like maybe like an acre or so for chickens to kind of be out. It's enough to make sure, like reading the public conception, understanding what the public perceives these labels as, and using that public perception to fully answer what they're perceiving these labels mean, to truly, so that they're correctly assuming what they see.
Okay, I think we're good.
All right, thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm ready when y'all are. Here you go. Conservation easement. These words are all too real for the viewers of America's #1 TV show, Yellowstone. In this show, the main character, John Dutton, owns a very large ranch that people are trying to take and develop. His ranch is his legacy, and his family fights tooth and nail to protect it. In the opening episodes of Season 5, John Dutton makes the decision to put his land into a conservation easement. The Yellowstone TV show is bringing new eyes and ears to the fragility of Western culture, utilization of Western resources, and social issues. Howdy, my name is Caroline Dudley, and I'm from Leon County, Texas. Over the last 5 years, I've talked to almost 1,500 people about the importance of conservation easements to rural America. When I first began this journey, almost no one knew what I was talking about. But thanks to Yellowstone, conservation easements have been introduced to millions of households across America. A conservation easement is a voluntary legal agreement that permanently limits the use of your land, but also serves as a way to conserve your heritage. Charles Maley of the South Texas Property Rights Association told me that many people utilize a conservation easement to conserve a legacy, but also ensure that their land stays intact as a single unit. As a sixth-generation cattle rancher, it's really important to me to conserve my legacy and the homestead that my family has been ranching on for over 140 years. This is why I've traveled East Texas advocating for conservation easements. Thankfully, my family homestead is still in one piece, much like the Duttons, but others around me aren't as fortunate. Finis Welch spent what seemed like a lifetime building what people called an empire. He called his work Center Ranch. Center Ranch was home to one of the largest registered Brahman operations in the state of Texas and a world-renowned quarter horse operation. Mr. Welch had upwards of 20 cowboys in their families that worked on the ranch and tended to the herds. The ranch was home to a vet clinic, an in-house mechanic, and also some of the best horse trainers in the business. When Mr. Welch died in 2021, Center Ranch was divided and sold. They sold everything, from the pots and pans in the cowboys' bunkhouse to their multi-million-dollar stud quarter horse. There was nothing left. Thankfully, some divisions of the ranch got sold to other ranchers, but headquarters wasn't as lucky. For the first time in 40 years, cattle and horses were not roaming this land. The day that cattle and horses left Center Ranch was the day that my drive to and from school changed forever. I live less than 5 miles from Center Ranch headquarters where the majority of operations took place. I've grown up driving by that ranch every day, watching the mama cows calve each fall, wondering if this year's calf crop could be any better than the last. I've always enjoyed cold, crisp mornings when we drove by the quarter horse division and the colts were out in the front pasture bucking and pitching. Some days I didn't even want to go to school. I just wanted to stay at Center Ranch and watch some of the things that I loved most about living in rural East Texas. Sadly, within less than a year, Center Ranch was subdivided. Center Ranch was broken into 450 small tracts of land. In November of 2022, construction on the first house in the Three Lakes subdivision began, and Leon County officially lost just shy of 3,000 acres of prime pasture for cattle grazing. Whether you love Taylor Sheridan's show of Yellowstone or you absolutely hate it, you have to admit that he's done an excellent job contributing to Western heritage by making the cowboy cool again. While the TV show does have quite a bit of Hollywood flair, Sheridan has brought quite a few issues to life that producers face every day. From animal activists to a spin-off series where the characters are pioneering the West, Sheridan has made a ruckus. In his own bold attempt to preserve Western heritage, Taylor Sheridan used profits from his TV show to buy the 266,000-acre ranch, known to many of us as the Four Sixes, where some sources say he has intentions of putting it into a conservation easement. The Monmouth Conservation Organization, as well as other blogs, have shared their thoughts on what they think these conservation easements in Yellowstone mean. Taylor Sheridan has viewers on the edge of their seat while they're looking to the answer of the real question. What is a conservation easement? A conservation easement is a voluntary legal agreement that puts a permanent set of restrictions on your land to protect its natural values. Limitations of easements vary from landowner to landowner, but come with a bundle of rights, such as trespass rights, mineral rights, grazing rights, habitat management rights, and the right to own and operate a hunting club, as well as to pursue other types of undeveloped recreation, such as fishing or hiking. For example, the family ranch, like my own or the Duttons, as well as a forest or a wetland, could be put into a conservation easement to prevent future development. While every easement is unique, many include the same 3 basic principles. Farming and ranching is permitted, development is limited, and surface mining is off limits. Leon County is located on I-45 between Houston and Dallas. Both urban areas are expanding rapidly. The state demographer tells us that 1,500 people are coming to Texas each day. Over the last 10 years, Texas has lost 2.2 million acres of land to urban sprawl. The Texas population has increased by 48%, which leaves only 1% of Texans as landowners. Now more than ever, conservation easements are essential to conserve and preserve our Western way of life so it can last for future generations. Center Ranch was just another loss to producers' battle against urban sprawl. Mr. Dutton really was onto something when he decided to put his land into a conservation easement program. My family put our ranch into a conservation easement so we can ranch for 6 more generations. We all must advocate for our Western way of life if we want there to be a future. What are you doing in our fight to conserve our ranches and preserve the Western homestead? Thank you for your time.
All right, since you said that your family has a conservation easement on it, how would you explain the process to a rancher who doesn't? What would you tell them to do?
So for the conservation easement process, the most important part is finding an agency or an organization that fits what you're looking for. Some people utilize conservation easements to conserve a wetland or a forest like I mentioned, while others use it to conserve something like a ranch. So Texas Farm Bureau actually has a program that my family went through to conserve our conservation, to put our land into a conservation easement. Essentially, you find a program that fits your needs, that fits what you want, and then you meet with the stakeholder of the organization and you discuss the terms and the deeds for your property. Deed work is done, and then you have a permanent set of restrictions on your property. It's actually, surprisingly, a fairly simple process. It's simpler than most would think, because the hardest part to it is finding the organization that fits your needs, and then from there you apply the restrictions to your deed. And one thing that many people find really interesting is that typically the person that made the easement is the only person that can reverse it. So for example, on our neighbor's property, Mrs. Hosley, she put a conservation easement on her land, and that's where we got the idea from. And so whenever she passed away and someone tried to reverse it, it couldn't be reversed because the original stakeholder had passed on. And so conservation easement, no matter what organization you go through, is a great way to do that. And so when talking with a rancher who might not have a conservation easement, I would make sure to iterate, find an organization that meets your needs, that fits what you want. All processes look a little different. For us, it was fairly simple. We just said, this is what we want to do. We don't want our land to be divided. Bam, we had deed restrictions, and now our property should be permanently together.
You said that you've been going around all over the place to go talk about this. Where specifically have you been going? What have you been doing to educate everyone else?
So public speaking contests just like this, I mean, we have a room full of people here that just got to listen to me talk about it. That's a great way to share your story. I've also talked at several local Farm Bureau annual meetings. I spoke in Leon County and Freestone County, as well as Robertson County. And then I've also talked to our local Delta Waterfowl Board. Leon County is home to the largest Delta Waterfowl chapter in the nation with over 1,200 members. And so utilizing our board as well as other local conservation organizations has been a great way to spread the word about this. And I've even talked to a few like local Lions clubs and ARB boards.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Ready whenever you are.
1 second.
Ride for the brand. The dismounted young cowboy asked the old hand, "What does it mean when they say ride for the brand?" The grizzled old timer, age seemed to drop years. He sat straight up in his saddle and he surveyed the steers. "Well, it means a lot of different things, son. It has a lot to do with what's lost and what's won. I ain't talking about gambling, but earning a living. Hard work, trust, respect, taking, and giving." In Mr. Red Siegel's poem, Ride for the Brand, the grizzled old-timer explained to the young buckaroo what it means when they say ride for the brand. Hello, I'm Lily Vogt, proud 4-H member, rancher, and consumer. I raise cattle much like cowboys in days gone by. My cattle graze the land. When we run them up, we sort the calves. Some are sold and others are kept for replacements.
those that are sold are taken to a local auction where brand inspectors ensure that the animals that I have sold are ones that I own. But would anybody even know that they were my product of hard work? On February 5th, 2010, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, announced a framework for the Animal Identification System, or NAIS, which has been strongly opposed by numerous livestock industries and associations, like the Texas Cattle Raisers Association. Diagnosis of BSE, known as mad cow disease, account in Washington state for the potential of an agroterrorism, only to exemplify the need for an effect of the National Animal Identification System. Has the old cowboy way become obsolete? Unique brands of the Old West meant that cattle from multiple ranches could freely graze together on open range, and cowboys could easily separate their cattle for roundup time. One of the most serious crimes offense in today's cattle country in the Old West is rustling, the stealing of another person's cattle. Old-time justice for apprehending rustling was sure and swift. The only penalty for rustling was a necktie party held beneath the nearest tree. Hang 'em high was the only justice for a crime like this. Cowboy justice reigned until August 31st, 1923, when Nathan Lee would be the last known man hung in the Lone Star State. Today, 29 commissioned peace officers served as Texas and Southwestern cattle rangers, and there has been special rangers to identify over approximately 1,000 head of cattle sold at 115 livestock markets each year. And the rangers have recovered almost $4 to $5 million in stolen cattle. In 1883, the Brand Inspector Service was established. Inspectors were located along the trails and at shipping point to protect cattle and the public. The need for an effective animal identification system has been expanded well beyond ownership to include 1. Foreign animal disease control and surveillance program, 2. Biosecurity protection of the national herd, and 3. Identification and vaccination of tested under official disease control and removal program. Mr. Gaddis, Georgetown, Texas pastures cows and their newborn calves have bright yellow ear tags with unique identification numbers. In Texas, the largest cattle state with over 13.3 million head of cattle. In Texas, the largest cattle state with over 13.3 million head of cattle. Each county must oversee its own individual branding records, thus making an accurate and complete state or nationalized surveillance system. As our state has more than 250 counties, is this the most efficient method of animal identification for cattle? The goal for the USDA and FDA is a standard method of animal identification, so that health officials can more easily track the origin of cattle diseases like mad cow disease and brucellosis. Mr. Gaddis, however, pointed out that ear tags can be easily cut out with a knife and are often ripped off by brush, so he brands each of his cattle with his ranch's 4G symbol and that cow's certain number. Most of us are going for branding, Mr. Gaddis says, because it's the only permanent form of animal identification, and most ranchers would agree. In conclusion, Mr. Redsiegel's poem, Ride for the Brand, ends. That's what it means, and a whole lot more. It means that you got pride in yourself, your job, and your land. So saddle up, toughen up, and cowboy up, and be a man or woman like me and ride for the brand. Texas cattle raisers understand the importance for blending our cowboy country in the Old West and modern day technology to produce a safe and wholesome product for the world. Beef. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, so how did you come up with this topic?
I came up with this topic from me and my grandfather always sat on the couch and watched Westerns. It was our favorite thing to do together. And I've always wondered, did they brand? Did they even have branding? So that's how I came up with this topic.
You mentioned the USDA as one of your sources. Is there any other sources that you utilized for
Well, I
this?
did. Sorry to cut you off. But I also use, as well as the USDA, I use many Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers magazines and their website, as well as the Southwestern Cattle Raisers Rangers website as well.
When you were researching for this, for your particular topic, what did you find most interesting or something that you didn't know before?
So I think something that I didn't know before was probably, that's a hard one. I think something I really didn't know before was that there's so many cases of just people that will terrorize animals, and like they'll maybe cut down fences and take animals, and it can be a $10,000 fine plus 10 years in jail for just stealing 10 head of cattle. It's crazy. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Good.
I would be willing to bet that you, yes, you, did not know that cows, goats, and sheep are all called ruminants. Now, you may be wondering, what the heck is a ruminant? And that's what I'm here for. A ruminant has 4 stomach compartments. Now do not get that confused with 4 stomachs. It's 4 compartments and 1 whole big stomach. Hi, my name's Crocky Ginther. I'm 10 years old and I'm a proud member of the Schulenburg 4-H Club. And today I will be telling you a little bit about each of these compartments and what they do. I think it's interesting that when baby ruminants are born, they only use one of these compartments. And I'll tell you which one that is at the end. Now moving on to the more important stuff. The compartments in working order are called the rumen, the reticulum, the omasum, and the abomasum. Well, we all know that animals eat, so I guess technically it starts with the mouth, which my mom says I have forbidden myself. Once the ruminant chews and swallows the feed, it goes through the esophagus and enters the rumen. The rumen is the first working compartment and sits on the left side of the ruminant's body. The rumen is the largest out of all the compartments and has a lot going on inside. And this is where a very complicated process known as microbial digestion takes place. To survive, these microbes need to be in a slightly acidic environment of 5.8. If the pH level becomes more neutral or acidic, these microbes will no longer be in a healthy nor happy environment, and they will not be able to do their job, which can lead to your animal getting sick or maybe even dying. That would not be a good thing to have on your hands. These microbes will start to ferment the feed over time, which causes a real stink when the animal belches. And that is also why the rumen is known as the fermenting vat. These microbes are crucial to the health of the animal because when carbohydrates are taken in, these microbes turn them into the 3 major volatile fatty acids: acetate, propionate, and butyrate. which is responsible for providing up to 70% of the ruminant's energy. Some of the most common problems that we see in the rumen are acidosis and bloat. Acidosis is seen mainly in show calves and feed yard cattle on high grain diets. Acidosis is caused whenever the pH level in the rumen drops. It causes them to go off feed and have scours. In the rumen, we see one of the two types of bloat, frothy or free gas. Bloat is caused by the CO2 and methane gases building up in the rumen and cannot escape. Bloat is easily noticed because the left side of the ruminant's body gets very large and the ruminant becomes uncomfortable. Once the rumen is done with its job, any undigested feed will travel to the reticulum. The reticulum is also known as the honeycomb because when opened up, this compartment looks just like a honeycomb. But I'll bet it does not taste like honey, even though it is an edible compartment known as menudo. The reticulum regurgitates the feed by eructation, and once the feed reaches the ruminant's mouth again, it's now known as cud. And ruminants can spend up to 8 hours a day chewing their cud. And they like to do this while laying down and resting. One of the problems that we can see in the reticulum is hardware disease. Hardware disease is caused whenever the ruminant picks up a foreign object such as a nail. That object will cause the problem in the reticulum. If noticed, you can orally give the ruminant a magnet. That magnet will then reach the reticulum, catch the metal, and keep it from going any farther down the system, causing more damage. Once the reticulum is done with its job, the leftover feed that did not start the process again will travel to the omasum, where water is absorbed. The omasum is pretty small and round, and since so much water is absorbed here, it's smaller than all the other compartments. When opened up, this compartment looks just like the pages of a book. Even though it's very important, not a whole lot more happens in this compartment. So moving on to the last compartment, but still very important, the abomasum. The abomasum is also known as the tricum, because research has proven this compartment is similar to yours and my stomach. In the abomasum, enzymatic digestion takes place. These enzymes are the last step to getting the nutrients from the feed that is needed. And guess what else? This is the first working compartment in a baby ruminant. See, I told you I would tell you. After this step, the leftover feed goes through the intestines and hits the ground with a splat. And that splat is also known as manure. That manure will then fertilize the grass to help start the process all over again. What makes a ruminant unique is its ability to utilize grain and forage diets. And that ends the process of rumination. What got me interested in this topic is whenever my first show steer beefy bloated. The vet said that his microbes in the rumen were out of whack. But luckily, he was okay. All we had to do was pull his feed, give him hay, and walk him. I hope you were able to learn something about the 4 compartments. The rumen, largest compartment, microbial digestion, free volatile fatty acids, the reticulum, known as the honeycomb, regurgitates the feed, the omasum, where water is absorbed, and the abomasum, enzymatic digestion. Thank you, and do you have any questions?
So you mainly answered my question towards the end, but I was going to ask you what got you started on this topic. Was it just specifically your show steer that bloated that got you interested in this?
Mainly with my show steer bloating, and we also raise cattle.
Okay.
So I kind of wanted to know more about the process.
Awesome.
Tell me a little bit about your sources that you utilized when you were doing this research.
The sources that I got my information from were my mom's old college textbooks, my local veterinarian, and Google.
Alright, so when you're doing your research, can you tell me what was the most interesting thing that you learned?
The most interesting thing would probably be that cattle can produce upwards of 25 gallons of saliva. And they produce all that spit so that they can keep the cud moist and buffer the pH level.
an interesting statistic.
That's a great fact.
All right.
Anything
I
else?
think we're good. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As I look into my crystal ball, I am frightened by the scenes I see. Family cattle ranches are few and far between. Grazing cows are no longer seen as I cruise along the country roads. And beef, well, it's not what's for dinner anymore. This glimpse into the future is sad. It's terrifying. It's disheartening. It's what our children and grandchildren will know is reality if we as agriculturists do not take a proactive approach in educating consumers and supporting the beef industry. Hi, my name is Keely Whitaker, and today I'm going to be talking about some common myths and misconceptions surrounding the beef industry and the new craze of lab-created meat. Now I'm certain that most of you have heard that beef should be thrown to the wayside and people should start eating lab-created meat. But why? What's the reasoning behind these claims? There are 3 specific reasons why this new meat should take the place of a good old steak. Number 1, it'll help save our planet. Number 2, it'll prevent animal cruelty. And number 3, it's healthier for humans. I've heard all these claims and decided to do my own research. My findings were astonishing, and I now realize that there are a lot of myths and misconceptions floating around. Let's begin by talking about the premise that lab-created meat will make great strides in saving our planet. According to the EPA, agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, and that's not just cattle, but the entire agricultural sector only accounts for 10% of all emissions. That's far behind the 29% for transportation, 25% for electricity, 23% for manufacturing, and 13% for commercial and residential emissions. So, it appears that cattle are unnecessarily getting a bad reputation. But wait, there's more. The most concerning fact that the media leaves out when informing consumers is that clean meat doesn't necessarily make a clean environment. According to the Journal for Sustainable Food Systems, lab-created meat actually accelerates climate change more than methane from cattle. As stated in the report, cows do produce methane, as we all know. Yet it only lasts in the environment approximately 12 years. However, carbon dioxide remains for over 100 years. And do you know what produces a large amount of carbon dioxide? Labs, including the labs that produce fake meat. Interesting, huh? The media also claims that beef production promotes animal cruelty through the harvesting process. However, the idea that lab-created meat is cruelty-free simply is not true. Here's what consumers are not told. Lab-created meat requires a medium for the cells to grow and reproduce. This medium is called FBS, or fetal bovine serum. Without the medium, the cells realize they are no longer in a living body and die, preventing the meat from growing into a product that we are accustomed to seeing on the grocery store shelves. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this may be a bit graphic, but I am going to present the truth to you today. First, pregnant cows are slaughtered and allowed to bleed out. Then the fetus is removed from its mother and taken to a blood collection room, where a needle is inserted into its heart. Oh, and by the way, the fetus is alive during this whole process to ensure good blood quality. The blood is then completely extracted from the fetus. It takes approximately 5 minutes for ultimate drainage and the death of the fetus. The blood is then refined, and the remaining extract is FBS, or fetal bovine serum. Not only 1, but 2 lives are lost during this process. So, as you can see, those individuals and extremist groups who support lab-created meat and horrendously denounce the beef industry on the basis of animal cruelty clearly do not know the whole story. And finally, consumers are led to believe that red meat, such as beef, is bad for your health. However, lab-created meat is still red meat. It is simply cells taken from a cow that have been allowed to grow and reproduce in a closed, confined environment. So, since the cells are contained to a petri dish, consumers should feel better about the product being safe, right? Well, not exactly. The truth is that lab-created meat is fed excessive amounts of salt and sugar compounds. Because artificial meat is generally colorless, odorless, and tasteless, hormones and artificial nutrients are added to the medium in hopes of producing a product that somewhat resembles regular meat. And plastic poses a real danger to petri dish grown meat. The plastic dishes contain many harmful chemicals, and chemical transfer from plastic to meat does occur. In order to simulate the internal body temperature for a cow, which is 101.5 degrees, the labs must stay extremely warm, which increases the chances of plastic poison transfer in the meat. As I close, I urge you to join me in support of the beef industry. Based on the information I shared with you today, you can easily see that our media does not follow the example presented by the great Paul Harvey. The public certainly doesn't get the rest of the story. So, public education is up to us. We must support agriculture, farmers, and ranchers, and we must inform others about false information, myths, and omissions. After all, we already have the best source for a healthy protein product, the cow. Maybe we should leave this God-given creature alone and let it do its job. Today, I leave you with these words by Gandhi. The future depends on what you do today. Today, I will advocate for the industry I love, the industry that feeds the world. What will you do today? Thank you.
So what made you choose this topic?
I chose this topic because I heard a story on the radio a while back about lab-created meat. I really liked science in school, but I just couldn't wrap my head around how meat could be created in the lab. So I did some research with my parents, and they helped me sort through credible and non-credible sources. And this is just what I found, and I really liked it.
Credible and non-credible. Tell me a couple of your sources. I know you mentioned the USDA, the EPA, and the Journal of Sustainable Foods. Were there any other ones?
I'm sorry, what?
So at USDA, EPA, and the Journal of Sustainable Food Systems, did you have any other outside sources other than those?
Those are mainly the ones that I used, but I also used the FDA website, and well, yeah, that's pretty much all.
When you were doing your research, what was the most interesting thing that you had?
The most interesting thing that I think that I found was that they made a medium out of fetal bovine, which is really sad to me, and I just don't think they should do that. They should probably find another medium, because that's really cruel to the animals.
Good, thank you very much.
Yeah. Have a good day.
6 minutes to each.
Is it Kelly with a K or a C?
A C. According to Dr. Carol Peterson, children can recall their earliest memories at just 2.5 years of age. One of my earliest memories was experiencing the family annual branding. I remember that around 5 a.m., my granddad would get up, cook a chicken fried steak, gravy, and biscuits breakfast for the whole family. After that, all the adults and bigger kids would leave, mount their horses, and ride off into the sunrise. My granddad would be the last one leaving, riding my favorite Palomino horse that he sometimes let me ride. No doubt that horse and my grandpa started my passion for horses. After the herd was brought in, me and my mom would venture down to the pens to watch the cowboys sort, brand, and doctor the herd. But I was watching the horses do their jobs. They were magnificent. It seemed like they knew what to do before the rider told them. Without those cowboys knowing, They taught me work ethic like no other and for caring for livestock in our Western heritage ways. Flash forward to last spring, now 10 years old, and finally old enough to participate in the family annual branding. However, the scene at 5 a.m. was similar, but oh so different. This time, I watched my grandpa swinging his leg over its mouth. Its strength and power was ready to gather cattle in the cool morning breeze. As he nestled down in his seat in preparation for the long ride to the far pasture, steam evaporated off of it, and man did it have horsepower. However, the leather seat was different. As he turns the key, there was no smooching to tell his horse that it's time to go, or the sound of hoofbeats riding away. Instead, a four-wheeler roared to life, and he raced away. Immediately, my heart sank. The horse my grandpa and I loved and trusted remained in the stall as he chose a machine as his partner. I was going to be horseback, but he was not. This got me thinking, why would he do this? Which is better, a horse or an ATV? This was not part of the Western heritage that he had valued and instilled in me. Will there be more empty saddles due to new power technology? What will happen to all the horses if they're not needed for work? Thus, we will examine in this Western heritage dialogue whether horses remain an economical, practical, and suitable means of ranching in the 21st century. Cowboys have relied on horses to work their cattle since the early development of America. Since the 1800s and 1900s, cowboys have developed a unique relationship built on long, hard days and a level of understanding and trust that's increasingly rare today. Although horses were once used extensively in agricultural practices, advances in technology have greatly reduced their use. The shift of ranching operations has both strengths and weaknesses that go far beyond a cowboy's passion to preserve the American ranching heritage. Due to new advancements in technology, horses are being replaced for daily work by 4x4s, pickup trucks, ATVs, and even helicopters, stated by Susan Nance, author of The American and Ranching West, published in 2021. Progressive Cattle Publishing asked, which do you use more, a horse or an ATV? The study found that 64.4% of cattle producers use ATVs more than horses on their ranches, and 29.4% of ranchers use horses more than ATVs, and 6.2% use both equally. Even so, there are several drawbacks to ATVs. They're loud. Someone must bring gas along for the longer jobs. They cannot traverse the terrain as well as horses. And they do not have the natural reactions of horses, stated by Temple Grandin. In terms of economics and quickness, it is hard to put a pencil and paper and come up with the answer. The convenience of the ATV cannot be matched even by the most reliable horse. It takes less time to start an ATV than it does to saddle a horse. And with their price starting about $5,000 compared to $15,000 or more for a well-trained horse, with no mention of the monthly feed bill. And they do not need stalls, feed, and brushes, and aren't spooked by a coyote or a simple piece of trash flying in the wind. But I have never owned a horse that wouldn't start on a cold morning or ran out of gas in the middle of a pasture. Chuck Schroeder, Executive Director of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, says, horses and ranching are intertwined. You can move in and out of a herd on horseback without the cattle even knowing you've been there. Where horses can go places an ATV can't, horses will watch their footing. If you don't pay attention, an ATV will take you right off a cliff or into a ditch. In terms of safety, issues vary. In some instances, a person is safer on a horse because a horse is more agile than a four-wheeler, of being out of the way of cows charging or bulls fighting. There are risks either way. Some landscapes are well suited for horses, while others are well suited for the convenience of an ATV. In conclusion, the world is changing. The modern ranch is not exempt to all the new trends, technologies, and advancements. The person that is handling the cattle needs to understand low-stress handling and always think ahead. Maybe we can find some common ground where both can be utilized effectively for the ranch today and used effectively for the ranch. Although machines make our lives easier, I could not help but think as a four-wheeler as an axe and a horse as a scalpel. While both have their places, there is nothing like having the right tool for the job, especially when it comes to the Western way of life. Thank you.
So what made you choose this topic?
So, currently, whenever that happened, whenever the cattle branding, when my grandpa did choose an ATV, I just talked about it with my coaches and my mom, and I was like, this would be an interesting topic to talk about, so people could understand why people choose ATVs more, and what current ranchers are doing today, and like why they're picking ATVs, or why people like horses better. I really thought whenever what that happened with my grandpa, I just really wanted to like go know more, have more knowledge about this topic, and so whenever it rolled around and it was time for speech time, I was pretty interested in doing this topic.
So you mentioned quite a few sources. Was there anything, what one in particular did you utilize the most?
It was probably either the AQHA website or the Progressive Cattle Publishing. I really looked forward into that to see why people chose ATVs over horses, why they chose horses over ATVs. So those were my two main resources that I looked a lot at. And on the AQHA website, there was a bunch of details on like how you can how you can ranch, and then that's where I have been doing ranching a couple of times, but it made me more knowledgeable about the topic, and so the AQHA website and the Progressive Cattle Publishing was probably my two main resources.
When you were looking at these resources or sources, what did you find most interesting that you learned?
Probably what I found most interesting, I didn't know that 64.4% use ATVs more than horses. I thought horses would be used way more than ATVs, and so that was probably the most interesting thing that I learned, because I thought whenever I saw that, I was shocked on I thought more people used horses more than ATVs, but again, 6 more people use ATVs than horses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Do y'all have a preference on where I stand? I just wanted to.
It's up to you.
Up to
Really,
you.
go for it.
Okay. Everybody's ready? Okay. When people ask you how the West was won, there are many common responses. Cowboys, outlaws, sheriffs, and Indians. But you see, all these answers are wrong. No, the West was won by Texas. Hello, my name is Aiden Hunter, and I'm here from Ellis County 4-H today to tell the story of Texas. Now, if it wasn't for our fight for independence and eventually the Mexican-American War, no other Western state would exist. So let's begin. I'd like to start with the old 300s, they call them. A group of 300 settlers that traveled with a man named Stephen F. Austin to the area we now know as Texas today. His father, Moses Austin, had arranged with the Spanish government to bring these eastern settlers to this new land. But unfortunately, on his way back from San Antonio, he died of pneumonia. In his final days on his Missouri farm, he compelled his son, Stephen F. Austin, to take over the venture, and he did. By the end of the 1820s, the population of the newfound colony had boomed. It was almost to 1,800 people, which for those times, this was a large population. Austin had to be selective about who he was bringing. Only 4 people in the entire colony couldn't read. And things were going well up to this point, except now they were under new leadership. Instead of being under the previous Spanish rule, they were now under a new country, Mexico, when they gained their independence from Spain. But with the fight for independence comes a cost. And that cost equals taxes, and the first people to be taxed are going to be your colonies. Those taxes were detrimental to the Texans. And Austin went to Mexico City to speak with the Mexican dictator, Santa Anna, compelling him to lower the burden on these agriculturalists of their time. But unfortunately, he threw Austin in jail. And Santa Anna, being a smart man, could tell that the tensions were rising with the Texans. So he sent 3 soldiers from San Antonio to the town of Gonzales to retrieve a cannon that was given by the Spanish government to check against Indian attacks. But they could see they were outnumbered about 180 to 3. So they sent back for reinforcements and came back in October of 1835. Now, when they reached the town, they camped on the other side of the Guadalupe River, and the Texans could see that the threat was evident. But they said, "We're not politicians. We're not leaders. This is not our fight to be having." And so that night they took that cannon and they buried it in a peach orchard. But then also, throughout the nightly hours, they kept thinking about 3 things. The fact that they were being taxed out of their farms. The fact that they had no representation in their own government. The fact that they had no control over their own lives. This built over into the point where that next morning, they unearthed that cannon. They put it on the back of a cotton wagon, and they put a simple flag with a simple message to the Mexican government: come and take it. And in one day, the Texans had their first victory under their belt. The spirit of Texas carried them all the way to December of 1835, where they took over modern-day San Antonio in the Siege of Bexar. But the Texans made a fatal mistake there. Over the winter, they started sending troops home. They said, well, the Mexicans wouldn't dare attack us in weather such as this. It was very similar to what we were experiencing last week. But unfortunately, they were wrong. And Santa Anna saw an opportunity at the mission within Bexar, known as the Alamo. As the Mexican troops were approaching, William B. Travis, the commander of the Alamo, took his sword. He drew a line in the sand. He said, all those who wish to stay and defend this place, stay, but all those who wish to betray it, go. Even after receiving a letter from Sam Houston, the newly appointed general of the Texas Army, to abandon the mission, they still stayed because they did not want the lives lost at Gonzales, at the Siege of Bexar. They didn't want those to be lost in vain. But unfortunately, not a single Texan soul was left at the end of the day. Most people would have given up at this point. I certainly know that I would have. But something stayed with them, that Texan spirit to never back down from the challenge and to do everything it takes if it means that it's right. It kept them going, and it took them all the way to Buffalo Bayou in spring of 1836. There in East Texas, Houston had his troops set and ready for the attack. The Mexican army was marching for 2 days straight without food or rest. It was the perfect scenario. And Houston saw that same opportunity that Santa Anna did at the Alamo. And so, in the piney woods of East Texas, Houston's troops marched upon the Mexican army, and in 18 minutes, the battle was over, and Texas had won its right to independence. Santa Anna fled on horseback. They found him at the bottom of a well in a dress, and so they pulled him out. They brought him to the battlefield where Houston was there lying on a blanket with a broken ankle, and they made Anna sign the Treaty of Alaska. It officially gave Texas its independence, but there were 2 issues with that treaty. First of which is that Santa Anna was a prisoner of war when he signed it. So Mexico did not declare that that treaty was good, or the fact that Texas had sovereignty at all. But the second issue is that borders. They didn't define them in the treaty. While Texas thought that we went from the Red River to the Rio Grande, Mexico believed that we went from the Red River to the Nueces. And so this was not discussed until 1845, when Texas was annexed by President James K. Polk in the United States. When Polk started putting settlements along this disputed territory, Mexico said, you can't do that. You're on our land, you have no sovereignty over it. And so this led up until finally they met at Palo Alto, outside of what is Brownsville today, and had the first battle of the U.S.-Mexican War. Eventually, the U.S. forces captured Mexico City, and they had the ability to take over the entire country. But Polk was a smart man. He had the idea of manifest destiny, that America should go from sea to shining sea. So he said, we're not going to take over your entire country, but you are going to give us every single western state from Texas to California, from Arizona to Wyoming. In the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which officially ended the Mexican-American War, they arranged for that clause known as the Mexican Cession that did just that. If it wasn't for Texas's fight for independence and eventually the Mexican-American War, no other western state would exist. So I ask you once again, how was the West won? By cowboys, outlaws, sheriffs, and Indians? Or was it by Stephen F. Austin, Sam Houston, William B. Travis, James K. Polk, and the Texans that make up this story every single day? Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah.
I guess I'll go
Well,
back
first-
into this position.
First, how many times have you given that?
I've given it since September 30th at Heart of Texas, about 12 times.
I would encourage you to record it, put
Yes,
it on
ma'am.
YouTube, because there's a lot of 7th grade history taught in Texas
Yes, ma'am.
that is taught by coaches that kids will learn more in your 6 minutes than they learn an entire year. So
I remember my 7th grade, my coach did it.
so it's unfortunate, but I mean,
And I fell into that same trap, but one of the things is that I've always loved history. I want to know where we came from, how we got to where we are, and can we prevent the issues that we've experienced in the past. If you look at today, we're having issues with our border and sovereignty over this land. But if they would just open up that 7th grade textbook, they might be able to solve a lot of the issues that we're having today.
I don't think I opened up my textbook in 7th grade, that's for sure.
you talked a lot about our past.
Yes,
Where's
ma'am.
Texas's future going?
So right now, we're seeing a lot of immigration from those western states that we brought in, California, New York. And so Texas right now is going to be changing vastly. We're going to be seeing different beliefs than we usually have. May or may not be a good thing, but I think that Texas still has a bright future because people are still avid about this story, and they're avid about where we came from and preserving the history, our Western heritage that we've had from the very start. And I honestly don't have any reason to worry about Texas's future because I think that people, if they keep listening to their history and learning from it, we'll be fine. What about you, ma'am? Are we good? Okay.
We're good.
Thank y'all so much. I appreciate it.
But for sure, put that on YouTube.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I'm going to the Alamo tomorrow, so I'm not recording.
Oh my gosh,
Oh,
record
that's
there,
cool.
even cooler.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I think I just want something. I don't remember that story.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Trip. Thank y'all for coming out.
Thank you.
I'm ready
Anytime
when
you're ready.
All right. The year is 1903. And after years of trial and error, the Wright brothers have finally made history with the flying machine. Although not the first to build or fly the experimental aircraft, the brothers invented aircraft controls, which gives them the title inventors of the airplane. 12 seconds and 120 feet later, they would accomplish a feat that would revolutionize the aviation industry today. Fast forward. The year is now 1921, and we see the introduction of the crop duster. The crop duster was a major agricultural advancement that took a great deal of labor off the farmers' hands. It helped them maximize their efficiency in the fields. Good afternoon. My name is Trip Reed from the West Plains FFA chapter, and I'm here today to share with you the ways aviation has changed the face of our agricultural world. Think back, if you would, to when you were a kid, driving down the road past rows and rows of corn or wheat. Every once in a while, you might get lucky enough to see a small plane take off and fly over the field. As it was flying, you'd see it spray a fog-like substance and wonder, what was its purpose? Well, as my mom explained to me when I was a kid, farmers use these planes to dust their fields with pesticides to ensure that they harvest a more healthy and profitable crop. And I'm sure she went into more detail, but all I could remember was how fun it would be to fly one of those planes. However, these days, I'm starting to see fewer crop dusters out dusting the fields, and I have to wonder why that is. As I began to think about what I wanted to write my new speech over, I thought about these planes, their use in agriculture, and where they are today. As I began to research, I found out that crop dusters are pretty remarkable. Did you know that they fly 10 feet above the ground at 150 miles per hour? And that crop dusters account for 4.4% of all aircrafts. And a modern crop duster costs about $1 million. I don't know about y'all, but that fits my definition of remarkable. In 1926, 44 million acres of cotton would only produce about 18 million bales. However, today, with the help of crop dusters, for every 13 million acres of cotton fields, 23 million bales are harvested. Further research showed that just like with most good things, there is a negative side as well. In an article written by Andrew Chichinowski, he states, crop dusting can be very effective in agriculture, It can help pests and fungi stay away from crops, leading to crops without diseases. Additionally, since planes are much faster than humans or tractors, crops can be planted, grown, and harvested relatively quickly. However, it can be extremely harmful to the air. Since the chemicals are being sprayed from the air to the ground, not all of them fall immediately down. Some of the chemicals can remain suspended and can possibly pollute the air. Additionally, people who live in these areas have reported dead fish floating in nearby streams and rivers. Others have reported increased respiratory problems, and they even contribute the death of loved ones to the exposure to these chemicals. While those situations cannot be proven to be a direct result of crop dusting, there's enough bad word of mouth that it has become looked at negatively by the public and by many anti-agricultural groups, such as PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. In the last 20 years, we've seen the number of crop dusting planes nearly cut in half. In 2003, there were about 5,000 crop dusters. Today, there are only about 2,600. However, for farmers to keep up with the demands put upon them by an ever-growing population, they must be able to maximize their yields. Thankfully, we live in a time where technological advancements can solve many of our problems. So let's take a look at the newest phase of agricultural aviation, the drone. While a seemingly new concept to us, UAVs, or unmanned aerial vehicles, have been around since the 1840s in the form of unmanned hot air balloons that carry bombs. However, it wasn't until 2016 that drones became a major agricultural resource. The introduction of drones to agriculture provides farmers the ability to manage their crops during the entire growing cycle. Through incredible technological advancements, farmers can do things they simply could have never done before, such as soil health scans, monitoring crop health, applying fertilizers, and watering the fields. They can even track the weather and estimate yields. Additionally, UAVs can produce precise 3D maps used for an early soil analysis and seed planting patterns. Crop monitoring and health assessments are some of the most remarkable advancements. By scanning a crop using both visible and near-infrared light, drone carrier systems can determine which plants reflect different amount of green and NIR light. This information will produce a multispectral image that can track changes in the crop and indicate their health. Additionally, as soon as sickness is discovered, farmers can apply and monitor remedies more precisely. With the world's population projected to reach 9 billion people by 2050, experts expect agricultural consumption rate to increase by 70% over that same time period. Patrick Charlton, Vice President of Alltech, stated, "In order for us to ensure food security in the face of an ever growing population, we must embrace these new technologies like drones. Farmers must come up with revolutionary strategies for producing food, increasing productivity, and making sustainability a priority. Drones are part of the solution, and like the Wright brothers, agriculturalists must take to flight and use these drones to propel us into the future." Thank you.
Thank you. It's funny that you say that, because I just saw a crop duster for the first time in a very long time, and I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, I just saw the coolest thing today," and it was going down as I was watching it. It was really neat. I do have a question for you. So with the use of drones, that is a higher technology, what would you tell my grandpa Joe down the street, hates technology, doesn't think it's going to benefit him any way in the use of his mom and pop farming? How would you convince him that it's a great deal for him to use?
Yes, ma'am. So I would assume Grandpa Joe already uses pesticides, and if he needs a drone, he probably has a crop duster. So the first thing I would do is explain to him that a drone is a lot easier to use than a crop duster. I'm sure you've all seen the inside of an airplane, all the buttons. I've been inside a crop duster, and I think there's more buttons than a Boeing 747. So I would explain to Grandpa Joe that no, I wouldn't use a drone to spray my whole field, which would make it a lot easier on him. But if he has organic crops that just need them for health, or if he has crops that just need them for growing purposes, that would be a much more reasonable expense than using a crop duster on the whole field.
You talk about expense. What's the difference in expense on using a crop duster versus a drone?
Yes, ma'am. So I spoke with a crop duster dealership or manufacturer out in Needville, Texas. It's one of 5 in the world. And I sat down with their manager and talked to them for a little bit, and he told me for someone to use them and their pilot, it runs them about $1,000 to $2,000 an hour. while a farmer can buy a drone for $1,000 to $500 an hour that can do the things crop dusters can't, so, like soil health scans or monitoring crops. So it's more expensive when you first get it if you're going to use a crop duster, but in the long run, using a crop duster over time and buying a drone once for everything you need, a drone is a lot more financially responsible.
So is the drone the reason why crop dusters are going out of business?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
All right.
All right.
Interesting
Thank
topic.
y'all so
Great
much.
job.
Thank you.